10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
No. 3, 2, 1.
This conference is being recorded.
Have a good show.
I guess the producer outdid me, so.
That was good. Anyhow, we are going live right now. This is Ed Johnston and Dave. We want to thank everybody for joining us. All right. Oh, I got to hit the live conference deal, so we're on. So anyhow, we're up. I passed the number out to several people that just requested that, so that's going out. So, but anyhow, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us. We appreciate it, and like I said, we are educating ourselves on these issues as well as you, because if we don't sit there and educate ourselves on these issues of what's really going on in our country, we're the ones who are losing. This is the point. We are the ones that are paying the price. You're paying the price with your children, and that's the most important thing that people need to realize this. First off, before we get too deep into this, I would definitely like to say that Dave and I are not attorneys. We do not have any ties to elected and public officials to confuse people or issues. So we want to make sure that does not become an issue with anybody. And that is the one blessing that we have to sit there and make, so that way people know the truth of what's going on in this country. And that means the Constitution. The Constitution is the law of this country, not statute, codes, and administrative rules. Statute, codes, and administrative rules only apply to elected and public servants, registered church members, okay? And people go, oh, yeah, what about registered church members? You can't do that. We're not saying that. We're quoting what the law says, especially the IRS code. The IRS code, when they put in the Bankruptcy Act in 1933, March 9th, okay, and under 192, and the structure, if you actually do the research like what we have done, it states this in the IRS code. Also, too, you can go to theft by deception, okay, and you can look up theft by deception. It's a video. It's an hour-and-a-half video, and I do recommend people taking the hour and a half to take the time to watch the video, because that video is going to educate you on taxes. This is the one thing that I've discussed this with many people. And so if you don't sit there and realize that this point is going on for yourself to protect yourself, okay, because you have to protect yourself. Nobody else is going to protect you. And this is the point that people don't comprehend this reality. And I mean, it is a reality. If you don't protect yourself, who else is going to protect you? And this is the major point. And the one thing, yes, I did comprehend where I've had people that have stated to me, Ed, quit jumping around on topics. We've got to start narrowing down to, 3 or 4 topics a night and sitting that. So I'm not arguing with those points, okay? But the main issue on that, sometimes we do get carried away, and I'll say it that way, because other times we have people that will be on the internet that will send questions to us when we're live. And this is the point that, this is the one point that, when they're responding to us, we might jump around because we want to make sure that we're trying to answer some of their questions. Preferably, we would like to have people join us on the show. And if people join us, that helps because they can speak on what's going on, and that is the major point there, because remember, this country belongs to the lawful bloodline Americans first. This is the point that when it belongs to us, we the people, we have to protect ourselves, our borders, and our livelihood. And that means everything that you do personally in your life, it affects everything that you do. And you don't think that this stuff affects you, and everybody goes, oh, I can go bury my head in the sand, all right? And then all of a sudden when it hits you, and I know this, I've talked to many people that, all of a sudden they end up in a situation, or they don't know how to handle the situation. And this is the frustration that we can prepare ourselves ahead before these things happen. Okay, and this is the one thing that you need to realize, that you have to do the research. I do get people that call me up, and Dave does too. Oh, write my case. Number one, we cannot write your case. We're not lawyers. Number two is we don't know your case. You have to realize the only one who knows your case better than you is you. And that's the bottom line. You know your case better than we know your case. Okay, we could give you suggestions on the laws and legal structures on these issues. Okay, and we have the information, and we have a lot of it on all 4 of our Facebook sites. And especially if you're dealing with taxes, go to Tax Fraud in America. You know, these things do have the structure for you to protect you. Okay, and that is the major point. You know, is to protect you. And I know that we jump around on issues, like I'm repeating myself, but I'm doing this to clarify so you realize we do listen to people and we do hear. But when we get messages, and like when I get messages on Facebook and people bring this stuff up, yes, I do jump around. And I know it gets confusing because I've had a lot of people in the last couple of days send me how it gets confusing for them. And to me, I think differently than most, apparently. So that's just the one way that happens. But Dave has a couple topics we want to get into tonight. I want to get into briefly with the topic that I'm going around, and I'm bringing up dealing with Kate Brown, our governor, well, not our governor, the governor of the state of Oregon. She is born in Spain. In the Oregon State Constitution and the federal Constitution, if you read it, and everybody, I was talking to another gentleman earlier, and he's going, well, anybody could run for governor or senators. They don't have to be born on this soil. The Constitution states that you have to be born on this soil to be in office. Oregon State Constitution directly states it, as most states do directly state it in their Constitution. That's the point. It does say it in the state constitutions. The state constitutions have to equal what the federal Constitution is. All right? It cannot supersede the Constitution of the federal government. Remember, the federal government is technically not the British government as we do know it. We know what they're doing in our court systems. The federal government technically is the Constitution of we the lawful bloodline. And I've talked to people going, well, what do you mean by lawful bloodline? And I have to be on this soil for so many generations? And yes, you do. This is where our forefathers wrote this stuff, and they wrote it with the natives. And when you think about it, and everybody goes, oh, well, the forefathers grew hemp, and of course they smoked pot back then. And everybody goes, well, the pot wasn't the same back then. Well, you know, the one thing is, that one always disturbs me when people say that, because you don't know. You weren't there. You don't even know the chemicals that they've added into our stuff over the years. So how do we know what's being added? That is the one point that people have to take in consideration when they're speaking up on these issues, okay, because we weren't living back then. We didn't know, and everybody goes, well, the Constitution wasn't written for us. The Constitution was written for us in the de facto one that was done after the Civil War, that was combined by Americans and the British government, the Corporation Contract of 1871. And if you haven't read it, please read it. They wrote that to protect the public employees for their service. And if they violate the service, we can file charges on them. And remember, when these public servants violate their oath of office, we need to file criminal charges on them. And everybody goes, well, that's supposed to be the district attorney's job. Technically, a district attorney is a hearsay witness. They cannot do it themselves. This is where people don't realize an attorney. And I got to have fun with, I want Dave to explain this one, because I love Dave's example, the way he says this. And this is the one thing that when you write your affidavits up, and this is one thing that I suggest that people actually put this in their affidavits. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to Dave on that one.
Good evening, and welcome to the show, for one thing. Or call, I should say. It's not really a show, it's a call. And Ed and I and Michelle have been very, very busy this week. And what Ed has asked me to touch on is the fact that Congress has made man an animal. And we now have kangaroo courts ran by jackasses. Thus, upon going to court and the judge declares you to be incompetent to represent yourself, and then appoints an attorney to represent you, and then when you are convicted of something, why is the attorney not going to jail, paying the fines, paying the costs, fees, whatever, whereas you are incompetent? How do you, and how does the judge then place you, an incompetent person, man or woman, in a jail? It's just part of being a jackass judge. How's that?
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. And also, too, shouldn't the attorney pay your fees? Shouldn't the attorney go to jail for you because you're incompetent?
That's right. How do you place? It's a question. How do you place an incompetent man in jail?
And so when they say, how do you plead, I can't plead to nothing.
That's right.
You know, unless there's an injured party, that's man, woman, or property damage. And before it even goes to court, you can write an affidavit up, make an amends with the injured party before you go to court, so this way you don't involve the court, and the courts have to allow you to make that amends.
Yes, but they don't want you to know that, Edward.
Oh, I know that. I keep forgetting that point, because if people knew it, they wouldn't be going to court. They would be writing their amends up and handling it before going to court.
And that brings up another very, very good point that Michelle and I talked about this afternoon. And Michelle, are you on here yet?
I am.
Good. Would you care to explain to the people relating to our conversation as to how to respond to a summons?
Oh, well, we touched on many different subjects on that. What I discovered, and just before I go on, or before I mention what the question, I also sent you David and Edward by email some information that I just discovered again on the topic that we're addressing. So I just sent you some stuff by email to check out later. Yeah, what I discovered, and I should say what David and I and Edward have discovered, I've been doing some research, and I've been kind of going back on documentations that I've had over the years and that I have forgotten about. And what I've discovered, believe it or not, some of the things, we're so focused on looking at the big pictures of what we're facing in life, and of course what we're facing as being under duress, as to the fraud that's being opposed upon us, that what happens is we focus on the big picture, but we don't look at the little things that has the important standings as to bringing a case into court or whatever. Now, what I discovered, what David is referring to as to the summons, and help me out, David, if I'm off on the topic, because I'm trying to remember what we talked about. We've talked about so many things. But what I discovered regarding the summons, I'm trying to remember exactly what I said. But what I discovered was the help me out, David. I'm kind of lost on what I was
issued a
saying.
Summons to court. And upon being summoned to court, many people do not understand or comprehend the fact that you have a right to answer the summons.
Oh, okay, now I remember. Now I know what you want me to say. Thank you. Yeah. What I discovered, and that was on another documentation that I found, and I was sharing it with David, and that's what I also sent by email to you, Edward. Now, what I discovered is the reason why they send us a summons is because, remember, when you acknowledge the summons, it puts you in their, I guess you could say, into their jurisdiction or into the court, because you're responding to a presumption. Now, when they send you a summons, that is a presumption of what they're claiming as to their complaint against you. So what you do is you rebuttal it, and I don't have the information in front of me because I didn't know you were going to ask me that question. So help me out if I get off topic. But anyway, what you do is you send the summons back to the court, and I don't have the verbiage in front of me, David, so help me out if you have it. But what it is you rebut as a rebuttal pertaining to the summons, and there's a certain verbiage you use, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, but you object to the summons. David, do you have the verbiage by any chance in front of you?
I'm looking for the email you sent me.
Yeah, I'm not on my computer because I had to leave my computer to get on the phone. Darn it, I can run quick to bring it up. But anyway, what you do by you objecting to the summons, and there's a verbiage I'm looking for. I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, and David's going to try to pull it up. But anyway, by you not responding and objecting to the summons, you don't even have to go to court. Because, see, what you just did is you're disputing and you're returning the summons with a cover sheet, and in other words, you're denying it. And there's a certain verbiage that you say. Unfortunately, David will pull it up in a minute, and we'll go back to that. But that's what he's referring to. And by doing that, now what you have done is you disputed what did I just say earlier?
You're disputing their complaint.
Well, you are, but that's not the word. It starts with a P.
There's a technical word I know that Dave was looking up.
The presumptions. That's what I'm trying. Okay, as to the presumptions.
You're looking for the claim, Michelle?
Let me go real quick and get on my computer. I didn't know you were going to ask me that because I would have pulled it up.
I know.
But anyway, that's what David is referring to.
I didn't mean to do that.
That's okay. Let me get on my computer and see if I can pull it up real quick.
The point that I wanted to bring out to people is that just because you receive a summons does not mean you have to accept it. Because what they're doing, if you look at a summons, and I got a summons to jury duty the other day, okay, it came in the all caps name, the corporate name. Now, that was another point I forgot to mention on the kangaroo court, that the attorney can only represent a corporation. So that is your all caps name, and that is known as identity theft. It goes back to your birth certificate, bonds. What they're trying to do is they're trying to steal your bond money. So this is why you need to rebut these court summonses, knowing that they are fraud in the inducement to steal from you. And these judges need to comprehend the fact that we are onto their little fraud scheme.
Dave, talk into the phone.
That we are onto the fraud scheme, and we're not going to put up with it anymore. So what the terminology that Michelle will provide you here in a minute, because right now I'm going through so much stuff that she sent me. I'm trying to find it. And she knows exactly what to look for.
Yeah. Here's another thing, too, as to what David is and what we discovered. The bond is the trust. Now, what I would like you to do, for those that are on the call, is I want you to go to your computers when you can, or even now if you're on the call. What I'd like you to look up is what is a trustee, and what does a trustee pertain to? Now, a trustee pertains to the trust. And there's different trustees pertaining to different situations, but when it comes right down to it, a trustee is a holder as to the trust. Just like the Constitution is a trust. Now, what the government and Congress, as to the branches of our government, what they did is, okay, they know that they're dealing with a trust, so they had to assign a trustee. So let's kind of look at this. I'm looking, David. Hang on.
Okay, well, for most people, it might be easier for them to understand that if you go to bankruptcy court, what's the first thing the judge does? He appoints a trustee to your estate, your property. And when he does that, it more or less freezes all the accounts. Nobody can buy, sell, trade, whatever, until the bankruptcy has been settled. So the trustee of the bankruptcy, by putting it in trust, no one can make a claim on it. So if you comprehend that, then we are on the way to your enlightenment as to why it is necessary for you to state a claim as the trustee of your property. And Michelle will bring these things to you here in a little bit.
Okay, I think I found it.
Nailed this. So go ahead, Michelle.
Well, the funny thing is what made me realize what was going on was it's called the Court of Due Process, and it's the Lies, and Deceit for Profit. That was the document that's what it's under, David, and it says from the beginning of time. That's the email that it's titled under. What you're looking for.
I'm looking at the wrong one, but I did come across real quick under 18 USC 1341 frauds and swindles. This is where you have the judges and the attorneys and the clerks of court and everything else. They have deceived you. Okay, so that falls under 18 USC 1341 frauds and swindles. These people elected to our offices as our employees are not in it for their personal gain. Therefore, what they are doing is in violation of this. And so you need to keep that. And I think that's carries about $1 million fine and 30 years in jail, if I remember right. So, okay, Michelle, I'll see if I can find that other email.
Okay. Yeah, because there was actually, unfortunately, there's so many different documentations on this, and so you kind of have to bounce around from one thing to the next in order to kind of get to the answers of what we're looking for. But what I had discovered, and just so you know too, Edward, I also sent this to you by email, and the title is From the Beginning of Time and From the Vatican, the Roman Court's Presence. Okay, so that's the title, in case if you're looking for it in your inbox.
I've got it up now on my computer.
Okay, good. All right, now I don't know if this is.
Okay, well, anyhow, let me let you get your thoughts. I want to jump in real quick here.
Yeah, go ahead.
And once you guys get your thoughts together, because we're people are going, huh? Anyhow, the one thing I want to bring to people's attention, why I'm getting ready to start this recall on Kate Brown. Okay, in the state of Oregon, the House and Senate are working on passing a bill to raise the property taxes in the state of Oregon 100% of what you are paying today. So if you're paying $1,700, let's say it's $2,000 a year, and they get this bill passed, that means next year you are paying $4,000 a year in taxes. Okay, and this is the point that they are going after this, and everybody goes, oh, well, who cares? If the government's going to do this, we just raise our fees because we own a business. You do that, your business clientele, you're going to lose 25% of your business. You have to step out of these productions, and I call them productions of what the House and Senate does, because a bill is issued. Okay, a bill is not a statement. And when they pass a bill in the House and Senate, they are telling you that they want you to pay their bills. And it's like everybody says, oh, we owe China this amount of money. When you do the research, we don't own China nothing. Elected and public servants own China. They're the ones that sign the agreements. And if you ever look at your registration card today compared to the way it was 10 years ago, when you register to vote, you are stating that you are willing to take on their liability issues. Please read your voter registration cards. And the other reason that, well, I've got several reasons beside that, because they're trying to pass a gun issue in the state of Oregon so they could come into your home like California is doing, to sit there and raid your home for firearms or arms. Okay, and they're going after this stuff, and not only that, Kate Brown signed a bill that if you have children, and if they are 17 years of age, they get mandatorily registered to vote. And if they don't decline that on their 18th birthday, they are registered to vote. Doesn't matter if they're vote or not. If they don't know it, they are mandatory registered to vote. This is how they're keeping you and your children in the British system. Remember, the elected and public employees in the structure of your government and history is the British government. The federal government is the British government under the 1871 contract we have with the British government after the Civil War. So this way we weren't supposed to keep on having these wars, and that goes back to the War of 1882 after the Civil War. That goes back to the war of the first Civil War, in World War I, where we fought the British. And don't forget, in World War II, we were fighting the British too, because the British was funding the German war, and they were playing both sides of it. And that's the point that people don't realize the real part of history. They do not teach this stuff in history, and that is the problem that we are going through, because history is not being taught correctly. They're rewriting history, and I've argued with people, and I'm still arguing with them, and I'm proving facts to them, because they keep going, well, we're still a British colony under the 1812 treaty. Read the treaty, the real treaty, not the one that they have mended and put up on the Facebooks and what they've mended on their, site, and I can't remember the sites that they put up this stuff, the where you write the history stuff up. They're changing this stuff. It's like going back to the 13th Amendment. All right, when Lincoln was elected, all right, and after the Civil War, they dropped the 13th Amendment out of the stuff. They dropped it out, and so people don't realize. And please type in the 13th Amendment. You go to New Hampshire, all right, the state of New Hampshire actually passed the amendment on that to make sure it complies with the Constitution. And, you have to know what these people are doing. Remember, they don't care about you. They really don't. They'll be sweet to you on the phone because they want your vote, so this way they can still take your assets. And that's where Dave was coming from. Your birth certificate is an insurance bond. All right, and that's a tracking record, so if you're lawful in this country or immigrant, and if you actually read the tax codes, it says in it who's to pay, and we actually have the laws on this. And it states elected and public servants, because they're doing a service, so they are liable. Okay? So you have a right to speak up on this stuff and know if you're lawful or legal in the country. You have to prove your bloodline. You prove your bloodline, and this is the point that I've been going with a lot of people on. We start proving our bloodline. This way we have standing. This is the point that you have to realize to make standing. When you go to court, you have to know what court you're going into. This is where you have to clarify with the alleged kangaroo court, or like Dave liked to say, the jackass of the court, because under Title 7, 136, Section D, we're all human, we're all animals. And that is the point that people have to realize. We are animals. Just because we have a brain and we think we're better than another animal or another structure on this planet, we are no different, because if you become hungry and if you have no water, you have no food, you're going to become an animal, and you're going to either go out and take somebody's food for them, their water, maybe their lives, or become cannibals. And that's what your country right now is trying to do, because if you go into the grocery store today, you realize that 60% of the food on your grocery store shelves today, 60% is not food. And if you get any stuff from Canada, not Canada, China, all the food structure from China, all of it, all right? All your rice you get from China, all of it is plastic. So you have to pay attention. If you get shrimp and seafood from Taiwan or Asian companies, they pump it with, plastic and silicone. So when it cooks, it expands. And they really do this. You can type it on the internet. I put it up on our sites, too, with the food structure on it, so people can watch this. There's scientists that have been proving this fact on our food resources. And then you wonder why you get sick and you have the issues. They do this deliberately because they know it. It's called job creation. When I was up at the Capitol and listening to all these people, and watching Congress federally and stuff, it is very interesting, because they always say, well, you people wanted jobs, so we gave you jobs. We didn't want the jobs. And the other point is, under 192, we're supposed to have a lot of this stuff prepaid for lawful Americans. That's why a lot of these immigrants that are doing these filings are ended up in jail, because you have to know these truths and you have to know what court you're going into. You have to be responsible and know the court you are proceeding in. So anyhow, do you guys get your thoughts gathered?
Yeah, I'm ready. Whenever
David's go ahead.
Ready. Okay, David, you got that document up?
I got it up. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to have you read it, David, and then we can go into more detail, because you probably can read it a lot better than I can. But if you go down on the page, hang on, I'll tell you, on page 4, start off where it says 7 regarding trustees.
Hold on a second. I'm getting down to page 4.
Unless you want to read above it.
Well, go ahead. No, you already said one thing. Don't change it. Let's not get people confused here.
I'm not. Okay, so if you want to read up the paragraph before it, that's fine too, David, because maybe the listeners might understand it better.
Page 4, trustee.
Where it says guardians.
Go ahead, Michelle. Read it. He's trying to find it. Go ahead.
Where it's on.
Just start it, Michelle.
I know, but I want him to follow me along. Okay, I'm going to read number 3. The presumption of the court of guardians is the presumption that as you may be listed as a resident of a ward of a local government area and have listed on your passport the letter P, you are and I'm not sure how to pronounce this, pauper. I think it's P-A-U. How do you say it, David?
Pauper. You're a pauper.
Proper, and therefore under the guardian powers of the government and its agents as a court of guardians. Unless this presumption is openly challenged to demonstrate you are both a general guardian and general executor of the matter, which is the trust, before the court, the presumption stands, and you are by default a pauper and lunatic, and therefore must obey the rules of the clerk of guardians, clerk of administration or administrates courts, resident, and then it has RES, a thing, indent, to identify. When you state that you are a resident out of court or in court, you are stating that you are the thing. And a pauper and a lunatic. No, how do you say it? L-U-N, or excuse me, lunatic. How could a divine being, living soul and flesh and blood, sustain man, be a thing? Now it goes into trustees. David, I'll have you read it. Can you see it now on number 3?
The presumption of the court of trustees.
David, talk into the phone. You're too far away. We can't hear you.
Presumption of the court of trustees is that members of the private bar guild presume you accept the office of the trustee as a public servant and government employee just by attending a Roman court. As such, courts are always for public trustees by the rules of the guild of the Roman system. Now, I've got to stop here for a second and ask you, ladies and gentlemen, when did you ever agree to Roman law in America?
I don't hear nobody say nothing.
Are always for public trustees by the rules of the guild and of the Roman system, unless this presumption is openly challenged to state you are merely visiting by invitation to clear up the matter, and you are not a government employee or public trustee in the instance. The presumption stands, and it is assumed as one of the most significant reasons to claim jurisdiction simply because you appeared. And presumption here is that you can do this all by letter to the clerk of the private court which you attended, affidavit of rebuttal of presumptions. Now that's a mouthful.
Isn't that a mouthful? So what David and I discovered is you don't even have to go to court, because what you do is you file an affidavit of rebuttal of presumptions regarding the summons. And then it goes on to say the presumptions of the government acting in two roles as executor and beneficiary. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Is that for the matter in hand? The private bar guild appoints the judge, magistrate, or the capacity of executor, while the prosecutor acts in the capacity of beneficiary of the trust for the current matter. Sound familiar? If the accused does seek to assert their right as executor and beneficiary over their body, mind, and soul, they are acting as executor, D-son, D-E, and then son, S-O-N, tort, or a false executor, challenging the rightful judge as executor. Therefore, the judge magistrate assumes the role of true executor and has the right to have you arrested, detained, fined, or forced onto you a psychiatric evaluation, unless this presumption is openly challenged to demonstrate you are both the true general guardian and general executor of the matter, the trust, before the court. Questioning and challenging whether the judge or magistrate is seeking to act as executor, D-son, tort. The presumption stands, and you are by default the trustee. Therefore, must obey the rules of the executor, judge, or magistrate, or you are an executor, D-son, tort, and a judge or magistrate of the private bar guild may seek to assistance of the bailiffs or sheriffs to assert their false claim against you and probate. Mouthful.
Can I add something to that, Michelle?
Sure can.
All right. When you go to court, too, and if you hire an attorney, and it says this goes back to John F. Kennedy, former president's case, because he didn't register in the Foreign Administration Registration Act. They went after him for not registering. All right. This is what the Democrats did first on John Kennedy. And it turned out, and the Supreme Court stated clearly that the attorney has to bring in the corporation charters into court to represent the corporation charters. An attorney has to do that.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a charter on your structure claiming that you're lawful or legal, and that structure, when you go to court, that cannot be entered into court because it's inadmissible into court because, you didn't file it in court to sit there and claim your standing. Go ahead.
That is correct. Now, what we discovered, and of course, keep in mind, this is a documentation that I just had on my computer, and I shared with you, Ed, too, so we can post it to those who want to see it, so we can put it on the Oregon, your website, Oregon Trackers. Now, here's the thing. What we discovered is there are certain words that we're not using to help us. And this is what we discovered in this documentation. And by the way, Hales versus Hen is cited in... Right, which is... Right, exactly. So that is cited in this documentation as to what David and I are talking about. What we discovered, hang on a minute, I got to go down and look for the word. David, can you help me out here? It had to do, remember now, the guild has to do with the bar association, those that don't know what the guild means. But the guild has to do with the bar association. Okay, that's where the word guild comes in. There was a word I'm looking for, David, that had to do with about the making a public record pertaining to the court.
I'm posting this on New Oregon Trackers right now, Michelle.
I'm sorry, what was that, David?
I'm posting this on New Oregon Trackers right now.
Okay, that's good. Okay. So basically, what Edward was talking about, you have to file certain things upon the court in order for you to address what you're going to say in court, and that's what Ed was referring to. There's I'm trying to
know this stuff before you go to court, because see, if it's not in recorded record, it does not exist. So it's called hearsay evidence. And these attorneys and these men and women do know this stuff. It's like when people sit there and say, oh, well, a congressman or senator wasn't educated in this. A cop doesn't know this. A cop doesn't know that. They do, too. And the one thing you could always ask a police officer, and they don't want you to know this, ask them for their handbook. And by law, they have to give you their handbook.
Yeah, that is true. That is a very good point.
And that is a reality point that most people do not know this. They do not want you to know this, because if you knew the system, this is how they cannot rape, rob, and pillage your assets. Remember, this whole structure of what they're doing is to rape, rob, and pillage your assets. They don't care about you. You have to realize this acceptance of fact. Because when it comes down to court structure, they are looking at how to make their income. Okay? It's like with children cases. They get paid to do this. The judges get paid compensation for taking your children. So do the caseworkers. Go ahead.
To prove that this is nothing but rape, rob, and pillage, they don't need any of this because the government is funded by the Fair Debt Reduction Act. And all the stuff that they're doing is to put money in their pockets. This is called profiteering from public office.
Yeah, it's double dipping.
It is triple dipping.
Well, that's true, too. Now, here's the good news. What it comes down to is a trust. Now, we have to think under contract law. So, as I was pointing out to David when we were talking earlier, and what I discovered and how I came across it is because I want you to look this up, those that are listening on the call. I want you to go to your computers, and I want you to, it's a simple thing, in your Google search bar, type in, what is a trustee? What does a trustee pertain to? Once you look this up, you're not going to believe what you're going to discover. Also, what I discovered, now this has to do with property homeowners. If you have a home and you have paid off your mortgage, what you do is you claim your property as you being the trustee of your property. Why? Think about that. The banks are holding the note, are they not? Guess what they are? They are the trustee and the holder of the note. Does it sound familiar? So what you do is you claim your property as you being the trustee of your property. Now, it's very simple, and you don't have to go to court. Ain't that nice? What you do is you look this information up under trustees, and what is a trustee? Then you go up and you look up the information. Again, Google search bar. In your Google search bar, you're going to put living wills. Guess what? These are standard forms. They're already there on the computer. All you have to do is type in living wills, and there's step-by-step manuals teaching you how to fill it out if you don't know how to do a living will. And it's the same thing. The only difference is you're claiming yourself as a trustee, and you're addressing a living will.
And that includes your birth certificate.
That's true.
Oh, absolutely. Now
you claim yourself. You own yourself.
That's right. Now, when you claim yourself as a trustee of your affairs pertaining to your property, meaning your home, your mortgage,
and your body,
everything.
Well, when you claim as yourself as the trustee, that covers everything.
You cannot say it covers. You have to put it in writing. If it's not in writing, it does not exist.
So what you do is you're addressing out a living will. But when you claim yourself as a living will, you're putting yourself in as you being the trustee of your property. Now, guess what? When you address these documents, like I said, these are standard forms. You fill them in the way you want to use your verbiage, because after all, these are just standard forms to help you. Now, and it's step by step. It tells you how to do it. They're standard forms, and you can electronically fill these out. You print them out when you're done. When you're done, all you have to do is submit them to the probate court. That's it. We've been going over all kinds of things, and we weren't looking at some of the little things. Now, when you fill out these forms, you can put in, like Ed's saying, you're going to claim yourself as a natural living man,
or woman,
or you can say natural flesh and blood man or woman. That is actually the proper way of the verbiage, as you can say a living soul dash natural flesh and blood man or woman. So it's all there, and it's step by step. These are like I said, I came across this information by just doing Google searches, by putting in certain words, and I was looking up forms. Now, when you go to the living will, when you type Google search in living wills, put in living will forms. Same for the other thing when it comes to trustees. Put in trustee forms. That's where and it will take you right to the websites, and it'll be step by step. But what you have to do is first learn what a trustee is, and read it, print out the information, so that way when you fill out the forms, you won't make any mistakes. You can go back and look at your notes as to what you printed out, and there you go, bingo. Now, it's the same scenario as to what Ed has been talking about regarding the bills that we receive. Well, they're not true bills. What they are statements. And, of course, a statement is not a true bill. So your electric bill and your gas bill and your water bill, what they are copies, and they're copies of the true bills that were already paid through the corporation as to our governors and our senators.
That's called your birth certificate bond under 192.
That's right. Now, the reason why the bond was created was because it was put into place for us if we not only to use it. It's not just to use, but it is. But it was put into place to cover our needs, like if we had gotten hurt, or if we were handicapped, or we became injured where we no longer could work. That's what that was put into place for. That's what the real purpose was. So that way we could fall back on our bond for that reason. Now, the estate, as to the government, as to the branches of government, what they did is they created a trust. Now, what they're doing is when they created the trust, remember, because they're claiming themselves as the trustee of your estate, as your affairs. So when they created this trust, they had to create a bond. Well, again, the bond falls under the same scenario as to what we're talking about regarding this information pertaining to the court as to the trust. So it all ties into one another. Unfortunately, when the IRS became created, the IRS was put into place, again, to protect us. Unfortunately, we have a lot of evil men and women who wanted to take that upon themselves and take from the bond money and, of course, use it for themselves. And this is where the fraud comes into play.
I have to interrupt you here, Michelle, for something.
Sure, go ahead.
First of all, the Secretary of the Internal Revenue Service was appointed by the President.
Talk closer to the phone, Dave.
To aid the Secretary of Treasury in collecting the tax on import-export. The IRS itself has never had an organic act of Congress creating it as a division of government. They are unregistered foreign agents attached to the IMF, International Monetary Fund.
And that's where the fraud comes in, David.
And that's where the fraud comes in.
Yep, you're absolutely correct. Because it could, just as I was indicating, that the trust, or as to the, and that's what, and speaking of that, the Attorney General's office, they are the oversight board committee. Believe it or not, they are the oversight board committee who looks over. Now, that's why each state has their own Attorney General, because each state has their own funds, right? Makes sense?
It has its own governor who is acting president.
That's correct. So the Attorney General, he is the oversight board committee who looks at the funds that are coming in through the state, and that has to do with what's going out of the state and into the state. And that's, again, that also applies to our taxes. In other words, what's the taxes, when the taxes come in, what are the taxes going to as far as the debt goes pertaining to each state. And then we have the trustee, not the trustee, that we have the treasury of the state. And then the treasury of the state keeps a record and has a fund, right? And that has to do with, where the people come in, and of course where the corporation comes in, because we have the corporation and we have the non-corporation. So that's where it all comes in. But we have greedy people.
Well, not only that, let me make it clear. People always tell me, cops don't make a lot of money. The police department, a cop really does make, on the average, $100,000 a year. Base start in most states, base start is $80,000. Plus, they get paid for every time they go to court. And when you admit or you pay a fine, they get a percentage of the fine. That's a fact.
As that being a fact, I have to tell you, Ed, since my husband was an officer, we never got that kind of money.
No, so he didn't, because that was then. This is now.
Oh.
See, when I was involved in that area, and I'm going back in the 80s, the average peace officer back in the 80s made anywhere, starting wage was $31,000 a year, plus 100% medical and dental. All right, so they had all that, and they had burial fees for the immediate family. That's the wife and children, and I believe there was a standard to 3 children on it, an original structure. And they didn't have all the structure what they got today, paying an insurance for their coverage and all that, because they were 100% medically covered for their service. And then it wasn't until recent years when we started getting invaded by these guys coming in and raiding our homes. Because when I grew up in the Bay Area in California, and I remember the days when a peace officer, and I call them peace officers, not police nowadays, but they're police today, but peace officers back then had to ask permission from the landowner to enter the property. If they didn't have permission, they could not enter the land of the property. And how they started changing that administratively, because people were having crimes, and some women, and part of it was some women truly got abused compared to the ones that got upset and made false police reports, okay, because some of them got truly abused. And there's a federal court case that clearly states, several of them, one, that these 2 women were raped, all right, in their home. They called the police. The police took their time. They went to sue the police on it. And the Supreme Court said the police is not there to protect you. It is to protect the corporation. They are not to protect the citizen or the lawful American. They are to protect the corporation. The original structure when I started going into policing was the policing were supposed to be policing elected and public servants. And when they violated stuff, and this is true, they're supposed to issue the citation to the public servant. And that includes if they're embezzling funds, stealing money, doing that type of stuff. That is the point. And that is the major point. So, all right, go ahead. I got to take this a minute.
Okay, I'm agreeing with what you just said, but I also know that as far as that goes, that's true. But I do know that they are also to protect us too, because of the way the Constitution was written. But that is true. They're there. They were put into place to protect the overall corporation as to and that's part of the Constitution. See, that falls back on the Constitution, because the Constitution is the trust pertaining to the corporation. It has nothing to do with us per se. So that would be true. For those that are listening on the call, an unlawful incarceration or mandatory damages are set at $1.8 million a day, based on fraud. You bet. Now this is a documentation that, like I said, will be put on the website as to the organ trackers, which is what David and I have.
Yeah, I just posted that document we're looking at on Oregon Trackers.
Okay.
Oregon Trackers. So if anybody wants to cut, copy, and paste it, they can do so.
So basically what I'm trying to say is anybody that receives a summons to appear in court, what you want to do is you want to return it with a note on it saying that as to rebuttal to the presumptions consistent of an affidavit of rebuttal, memorandum, support of affidavit of status, standing, and instructions, send $200 check or money order made out to the disregard that. That's something else. But what you want to do is in other words, you're going to do a rebuttal to the presumption, because remember, it's their presumption, right? It's their lawsuit upon you. So when you do a rebuttal to the presumption, guess what you do? You force the hand. Now they have to prove their wrongdoing, not you, because you just turned it over back to them. And that's it. That it says that in this documentation as to what we discovered anyway.
Michelle, at this point in time, I'm hoping that people are up to date on what we're trying to talk here. But now you need to go into the IRS form 14039, identity theft, and file that on the court. Plus, you need to file the 211, form 211, also, to get your damages.
Yeah, the 211 is the IRS form for a reward.
It's an application for award for original information.
Correct.
And it's a very simple. Both of these are very simple one-page documents, and you fill them out, print them off, and you can either fax it or mail it in. To the IRS on the 211 form, you can email it. However, what I discovered on emailing it to the IRS, they are behind on their emails, and the email bounces because they haven't responded and gotten them cleared out. So people must be really filling these things out and jamming up their websites. So, therefore, you need to probably mail it in if you want to get some fast action on it.
I agree. What I would recommend, and what I had done when I filled out, well, first of all, I made a claim as to me being a victim to identity theft regarding my mortgage, and then I did the 211. Now, what I did is I faxed the one form, which was the identity theft form. But then what I did is I attached both forms together with my evidence, of course, and I sent it by certified mail with a return receipt. Now, when you fill out the identity theft form, which is an affidavit, by the way, when you fill that out, what I did is I indicated that I was going to attach the 211 form to my claim. That way it was documented. Not only did I make an identity theft claim through the IRS, but I was letting them know that I was also filling out their form, which was the 211 form, regarding the reward pertaining to me being a victim to identity theft. And that's why. And then I attached the two, and I sent them both with a copy of evidence, of course.
Michelle, could I add something to that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
42408C says clearly, if you give your Social Security number out, even to an employer, or use it any other way besides keeping it to yourself, it's a federal crime.
I agree.
Please look at 42408C, and you will see this. And this is the point. They don't want you to realize that they have in their system to protect you, and that's called remedy, because they have to keep remedy in the system because that's the only way they can exist. Go ahead.
That is true, Ed. That is true. Now, because Ed brought that up, now I'm not. Remember, we're addressing the IRS form. Now, if I was addressing another corporation or another business, you're dang right, I wouldn't be giving out my Social Security number. But because the IRS already had my Social Security number on file with them, because after all,
why
I don't
is
have,
that?
I know, Ed.
I know, because you filed on taxes.
Well,
yeah,
not only because of that, because a lot of people didn't even file taxes, but because we filled out the W-9 forms or other W forms, and what do their forms ask for? Is your Social Security number. So there's many ways that they got your Social Security number, and of course that's true pertaining to your taxes. If you are a homeowner and you pay taxes on your property, yes, that's another way of them getting your Social Security number. So because they already had my Social Security number on file, I sure in the heck wasn't going to give them a copy of my driver's license. So what did I do? I made a copy of my Social Security card, and I gave them a copy of my Social Security card because they already had that on file. Keep in mind, though, when I was making my claim under identity theft, that falls under identity theft because that's what I was claiming. So they're going to know, oops, this person's claiming identity theft, because remember, who are we addressing? It's the corporation, which is the trust pertaining to the Constitution, and of course the Constitution that pertains to them, because what did they do? They took an oath to protect the Constitution as to the corporation. And that's where the treaties come into play and all this and that. So that's another thing. So that's why I gave them a copy of my Social Security number, because I wasn't going to give them any other thing pertaining to my driver's license regarding their own document. They already know. In other words, they already got everything on me, and that was my Social Security number and my address, and of course my name. They didn't need anything else. So that's why I did it that way. David, you got anything to say? I hear something. This has to do with individuals.
Right. In the part where Michelle was telling you're entitled to $1.8 million a day, down further on the document that I just got through posting on the New Oregon Tracker's website, that court case that allows you to do that is listed there. Trevevent versus City of Tampa, 741, 1984 case. And the jury allotted to Trafficant $25,000 for 23 minutes of unlawful incarceration. In a 24-hour period at $25,000 for every 30 minutes equals $1.8 million per day. And
thank you, David, for addressing that.
For false arrest.
Yeah. So it just goes to show you. It goes to show you. Now, David, you also discovered too, under fraud and things. What was it? 1,000 something?
It's actually 5 years in jail and $1 million fine.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Okay.
And that's under, I think it's 18 USC 1001.
Right. Now I found another more information, I should say, and I shared it with you and David. You and Edward. Unfortunately, I'd have to go try to retrieve it, but it's more information to back up our claim and it gives the more detail on money. But I'd have to go back and retrieve that.
Yeah,
that might have been under the criminal complaint. where I think I saw that information.
You get into criminal on this, and they actually go to court with it. Each one of the statutes on fraud and criminal activity carries its own, dollar amount that you're entitled to receive. And there again, you have to make your claim so they don't steal it from you, which is what they want to do.
Oh, that's another. I'm glad you mentioned that, David. David brought up a good point. And on the documentation, the one that David and I were just going over, when you address the court, you want to address it as a public. Was it a public record, David? I said to you. How was that?
Establish a public record. Any court of public record. In other words, it could be the probate court, or it could be the U.S. military. You have to remember that under martial law, all the government entities were suspended. The Constitution was suspended, so basically they terminated themselves. Legislative, executive, judicial branches terminate themselves. Everything falls under martial law, thus the Air Force JAG Corps, Army JAG Corps, whatever, are actually the trial courts.
Yeah, that's true.
And people, this is why you need to rebut these court summonses. Because
not only that,
that's why they fly that gold fringe flag in the courtroom. So they don't have jurisdiction as the state court or the federal court, because, Roosevelt suspended, Lincoln suspended, God knows how many other presidents suspended the Constitution and declared martial law.
That's why on your form...
Obama just got through doing it before he was, overthrown?
Yeah, I think... Yeah.
And Kennedy was the one who rescinded that.
Yeah, but Obama, before he left office, declared martial law again.
David, there's a thing on that documentation that we have too about the thing. Remember, I was telling you that we are addressed as a thing, which is true.
Yes.
As to the trust pertaining to the corporation in these courts.
Well, we need to explain the thing maybe to people too, what the thing is.
Yeah.
When Congress declared man an animal, that is a commodity to buy, to sell, to trade, whatever they wish. You see, there's the thing. The corporation, and that's what they're acting under, is the corporation. 28 USC 3002 definition 15, United States means a federal corporation. Okay? So that is without standing in law, because there was never a constitutional amendment granting to our public and elected servants the right to create this corporation. So it's fraud in the inducement. And fraud is null and void on face ab initio from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So once they created a corporation, and by the way, there is nothing in our Constitution that grants to this corporation the right to borrow money using our names, good faith, and credit. So these bonds that they created are of no standing in law as to them. They pertain to us, as Michelle said. They are to pay for our obligations, our debts. Therefore, that is why you need to make claim of them as the trustee. I hope we're getting this across to the point where you understand it, or comprehend it, because it's very, very important that each of us know what we're doing. The case I have in probate court right now will be served these documents. And since they failed to rebut the affidavit filed in their court within 10 days and waited 50 days, I now have unrebutted affidavits in the probate court, which I intend to take full advantage of and get a summary judgment.
And the trustee can hold can hold the. In other words, it can hold the property or the note. Can also the trustee can. Let's see. Hang on a minute.
It says file. In this situation, it's a bond, an insurance policy.
Right. And
one thing you guys did not bring up. Remember, they always have reinsurance on all insurances, and even on your mortgage. When you sign for a mortgage, you have reinsurance on that mortgage that if you don't pay, they collect. And if you don't claim that in 3 years, the banks can collect it for you.
That's why that's true, Ed. You're right. We didn't touch on that. Now, that's why you have to look up what a trustee does, what pertains to a trustee, how it works. When you look this information up, I'm telling you right now, you're not going to believe what you're going to discover, because the trustee holds the trust, vice versa, and that falls under equity. Remember, it comes down to value, money. The equity, okay, as to the enforcement of the desiree in equity. Okay, so it comes down to the trust. That's why you want to claim yourself as you being the trustee to your property. Nobody can take your property away from you because you are the holder as a trustee, and you can appoint a loved one. So, like, for instance, if you die or something happens to you, or you become where you mentally ill, you're incompetent, you appoint another trustee to your property. That's why it's like doing a living will. That's what I discovered, and I am so glad I discovered that. That's why the banks claim they're the trustee of your property, and that's why they can't sue you. A trustee that holds the note to your property cannot sue you. That's why they have to do a transfer. And who do they do that transfer to? A new servicer or a new lender. And then they claim that person to sue you, which we know is fraud, and that would be under identity theft.
Mm-hmm.
True.
And this is where people. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, what I'd like you to write this down. It's Columbia Law Review, and it's volume XV11. So that's 11. Or I guess no. Wait, hang on. That would be 27. No, I'm sorry. That would be 17. Volume 17, and it's dated April 1917, number 4. And that comes up under the Columbia Law Review as to the, how do you say that? I want to pronounce it, Costa Quo Trust. Is that how you pronounce it? C-E-S?
Close, but I want to take a break here from us, and I would actually like to open the floor if anybody's got any comments or thoughts,
sure,
or if they have something that we might have missed or something to that effect. And then we'll get into some other questions too, dealing with other type of cases. But does anybody have any thoughts on what we're discussing right now? Okay, we don't have any response. So go ahead, and then we'll get into that one.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead, may I?
Dr. Claude, how are you, everyone?
Oh, good to hear from you, Doc.
It's good to be heard from. On On the topic of trust, are we talking about a revocable trust?
It would under all. Yes.
Wait a minute. Dave was speaking, but Dave, you got to get close to the mic. We can't hear you.
I am right here, Ed.
Well, it goes in and out. I don't know what's up, but go ahead.
Well, in any, you need to study what the trusts are, because there are dozens of trustees, I mean. And so when you get into the actual appointing yourself as the trustee of the bond, the commodity, whatever it is, and you appoint yourself as the trustee, they cannot come in and take any of it from that point on.
Correct.
So it's a very simple form to fill out. And again, I say you need to go in through identity theft under the Form 14039, the theft affidavit, and then the 211 form, which is your affidavit of truth and right to property. So I think you've been through this with the courts. Oh, and by the way, you can open up your court case, by the way, as new evidence.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go back on any closed case and bring it back up as new evidence.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to add to this, remember, when your children are born, before they are born, you claim them as property. It's your bloodline. You own it. And if you don't claim it, that's how they're able to claim it.
And how you claim that is through, and that's exactly right. And how you claim them or claim it is you put them in as a trustee. It's just like doing a living will. That's why you have to look up this information, read it, because once you read it, it's step by step, and it explains everything what we're talking about on the phone here, or what I'm talking about anyway, as to the living will, as you claiming your property as a trustee. You claim your dependents as a trustee. It's just like doing a living will. If you don't know how to do a living will, then you need to go and look it up, read on it, so you know how to do a living will. And that's all you have to do. There's standard papers, standard forms, and you just fill it in. You claim it. But what I discovered as you claiming your property as you being the trustee, just like Ed was saying, they can't, and I'm saying, they can't take that from you, just like you couldn't take it from the bank. Now, if your mortgage is paid off in full and you have no mortgage, God, I hope you do this, because that will stop any kind of other fraudulent claims to come forth upon you pertaining to your property. That's how I discovered this, and that's when I was looking up this information. Now, if you are fighting foreclosure, and that's another thing pertaining to foreclosure, if you had filed bankruptcy and you had a discharge, and you have documentation on that, like David brought to your attention, again, you go and you look up these forms, just Google search it under forms. There are actual claims you can make pertaining to the bankruptcy court where you actually can overturn the status regarding you being a victim to fraud, and whatever evidence you have, of course, you bring in the evidence, and you can claim that you're a victim to identity theft. Guess what the good news is, as David just said a minute ago, regarding the IRS form. You use the IRS form, you fill in the information, and of course, any evidence you have, you attach it. Now, what I did is I claimed I was a victim to identity theft, and I'll read again to the verbiage, how I did it. And what I did is I claimed I was a victim to identity theft regarding a fraudulent claim that was brought forth upon me because, after all, I didn't have a mortgage and I didn't countersign by the endorsement specimen signature that I had received that money. Now, that was the verbiage that I used on my identity theft claim to the IRS.
And I want to point out, Michelle, right now that many of us who get a loan for our homes, the money is never given to us. It's paid directly to the real estate company or the homeowner.
That is correct. And that's
so
another
now
form
we
of
have
fraud.
A situation that, oh, gee, we never got the money. So who did? Really get it?
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is interesting conversation we're having. As we're talking about the mortgage etymology, understand what we're talking about. Morgue and the age of time that you're putting in for it. That alleged funding that you're applying for goes into your monetary sesticate fund, that they go into your account and take that money out and monetize it 5 times the amount that you're applying for.
That's exactly right. You are 100% correct.
So
and
you're never receiving anything, which is a part of the fraud that we're talking about. But I stumbled across something else, guys, that is interesting, because all of the financing that goes on here in the corporate fiction goes to the Queen and the Pope. So there's an estate claim that we should be thinking about that goes that you're putting the Pope into this estate claim that puts it into a lien against the Pope.
Oh, that's a good point, because.
And remember, one thing is with the Pope, when you register your children with the state, you are claiming that you are irresponsible and cannot handle your responsibility. That's where the Pope and the church come in and says, "Oh, pray to us, we'll save you." Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Remember, Ed, that's all fraud in the inducement, because they are failing to, in these contracts,
well, so is religion.
To tell you the purpose.
Also, guys, that what has taken place on the pilgrimage of why the Pope was traveling around the world, he put into law a claim of motu propria, which means there is no more immunity for the judges, lawyers, anyone in governmental positioning. It's called motu propria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that was after I filed on his soul.
It was.
Yeah, that's when he became the unofficial Pope, too.
Well,
what you're referring...
Quiet as kept, the Pope and the Queen are under house arrest.
Right.
Then we're not supposed to know that, guys.
Well,
exactly. Well, here's something else. I wasn't going to go into all this detail because I don't like to bounce around too much because it's confusing. But canon law, see, our lawyers and attorneys, they're not taught canon law. What they're taught is civil law. Canon law, that's where the Bible stems from, is canon law. So what they did is later on,
Michelle.
Huh?
The Bible is not from canon law. The Bible.
No, I said it's based off of canon law.
Hebrew law.
Thank you. Jesuit Jews.
Ecclesiastical law. Ecclesiastical law.
Good point. Thank you. We're getting it. Yes.
Yeah, that is true.
And that's the point that people have.
Let me clarify what I was trying to say. canon law, even though that what you said was correct, but they also were basing it off of canon law, because the before the Bible was written, law was already in place.
In England, not the United States.
That is correct.
A foreign country.
That is correct. So it was brought to the United States. When the law, canon law, I'm referring to canon law now, when it was brought to the United States, then it was translated into English. And of course, the Bible was written to control.
The fraud happened before as canon law was being written. That's where the fraud began.
I started from the Treaty of 1213.
Nowhere did God ever give any authority to the Roman Catholic Church.
Oh, isn't that why Moses supposedly in the Bible said what he said?
Well, what are you referring to as to what he said? I had to clarify that.
Well, remember, he went there to the king and turned their water into blood. Okay, and he's telling them if you didn't listen to what everybody's talking about God, because I refer to God as a great spirit, when you sit there and they question him, he sat there and poisoned the water. He sat there and poisoned the structure. And then that's when they started giving the firstborn to the system.
Well, the firstborn of Egypt was killed. Remember that?
Correct.
That's correct.
As punishment for not obeying God.
Right.
Comprehend this, Ed. Every time that God directed the children of Israel to go to war, what did he tell them to do? You kill every man, woman, and beast of the field. Man, woman, child, and beast of the field. You know why? Because if you take away the food supply, any that remained or escaped the initial death would starve to death.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's true.
God did not want someone to come back years later and then kick them. He made sure at the beginning that there were no survivors. And that's the way we need to conduct our war today. If we're going to win a war, you don't play this pussyfoot game going around. Did not God teach you anything when you were, I thought you boys studied, what do they call that, wars?
Bible, yeah.
Military. The Bible's included in that because some of the best wars in the history of mankind are recorded in the Bible. And when God was in charge, he left nothing unturned.
Well, and that's why the statement is made too. Which law do you want to follow? That's why that statement was in there. The false ones are the right ones,
Uh-huh.
That is so true. So canon law, when it was brought to the United States, and those that are, because remember, our attorneys and the lawyers today that go to law school, they're not taught canon law. They're taught civil law. There is a difference. And that's why there's so much confusion, because all they're doing is addressing statutes and codes and da-da-da-da-da, and they're modifying this and they're modifying that, and that's why it's so hard for us to find the truth. We have to really dig in order to find the truth.
Yeah, and
when
that's
it comes
why you
to
can always go back in court to the beginning. In the beginning, God. And what did God do? He created all things. So if God created all things, how can you rape, rob, and pillage us? You don't own it, you didn't own it, and you never have owned it.
That's true. Same with our property, our land.
You did not create it, and neither did the Pope.
That's that. There you go. That is correct.
Your allodial title to this land that gave you permission to sell it. Are you not familiar with land theft and that it's punishable by death God made you a trustee of this land. The only person God ever gave any land to was Abraham. And it's recorded.
Now, isn't that funny? You just said the magic word. What did you just say? The trustee.
Mm-hmm.
And they took that from us.
And remember, that was given on foreign soil, not this soil.
Doesn't matter what soil, because in the beginning God created all things.
Amen.
Yeah, it doesn't. I was just going to say, I was going to ask Ed to define that but yeah, that is correct.
Call him the Creator if you wish, Ed, or you can call him God, or the Everlasting, or the Prince of Peace, the Mighty God, whatever. There are dozens of names for the Great Spirit.
Well, that's why the word God that's where liberty comes in. It's the highest of all. That's what the word God means. I don't know how to say it any better than that. But there is no other word to compare it to.
I mean, you had a group of men on here and a group of men there and a group of men there got together and they say, okay, we're going to rule the world. Wrong. You don't have any authority to do that in the first place, because you were never given by God that authority. Period. And you can't make claim for land that you don't own or never did own. That's land theft. Again, punishable by death.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we have to remember too, we have the federal, and then we have the federal corporation, and we also have the state corporation.
And city and county.
Act of 33.
I would think the city and the county falls under federal, does it not, Ed?
No, it's supposed to fall under state.
Oh, the city, okay, state then?
Right, and then I'd like to bring up, judge rules government debt is covered by the FDCPA Insurance Fund. That was published 18 December 2014. And we do have this up on my walls and stuff. And you can type that in. Judge rules that government debt is covered by the FDCPA. And so you can read the court case, and everybody says, oh, we got to pay property taxes. We got to do this. We got to do that. It's already covered under the insurance. Remember, when they first started bonds in this country,
why do you think
all the bonds were publicly owned? None of it was privatized.
Why do you think that the cities, the townships, the villages, the states all create budgets every year and then submit them to the federal government for funding? And then the federal puts all theirs in a, what do they call that? They also put it in
a bond?
A budget.
Oh, a budget,
it all goes
okay.
into the budget. Everything goes into the federal for the... Why do you think this budget that they bring out every year is stacks of budget? I mean, we're talking millions of pages here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all funded, as it said, FCCPA. They don't need taxes. They don't need all this rape, rob, and pillaging that they're doing, and it's time to put it to an end.
Well, that's why, David, remember as we were talking, I was talking about the conversion. And that's another term that you need to look up when it comes to the law, and that's the conversion. Sure. If they're addressing us as a corporate identity, as stealing our identity, okay, then we have the same rights as they do, but we're not getting the same rights as what they're doing. Well, that would be a conversion. And if you can prove a conversion, that's a violation. And there again, you got a claim.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing as the taxes, for instance. That's a conversion because you're paying taxes on property that you're not supposed to be paying taxes on, because after all, that's where the word volunteer comes in. You know, you have to do your homework, but that's basically what I'm talking about as to a conversion.
Yep. Well, here the IRS does the conversion when they give you a notice of levy and lien, which starts with Part B under 6331 of the Internal Revenue Code. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it very plainly says here the authority of the Secretary under A, and I'm looking at it right now. If any person liable to pay any tax, any person liable to pay any tax neglects or refuses to pay the same within 10 days after notice and demand. Pay attention. Notice and demand. Not a notice of levy and lien. See the fraud scheme?
Oh, good point.
Okay. So, anyway, within 10 days after notice of demand, it shall be lawful for the secretary to collect, not the agent, the secretary to collect, such tax and such further sums as shall be significant to cover the expenses of the levy, by levy upon all property and rights to property, except such property as is exempt under Section 6334. And if you go into there, it doesn't pertain to you and I as the individual. Belonging to such person or on which there is a lien provided in this chapter for payment of such tax. Now, here's the kicker. Levy may be made upon the accrued salary or wages of any officer, employee, or elected official of the United States, the District of Columbia, or any agency or instrumentality of the United States or the District of Columbia by serving a notice of levy on the employer, not the employee,
Mm-hmm.
of such officer, employee, or elected official. And
there you
goes
go.
on a little bit to explain some other stuff. But there it is. It is the secretary who does this, not the IRS agent. And the banks and your credit unions and all those people, they see that levy and they go, oh, yeah, we got to hand it over to them. No, because, number one, they violated due process.
Boy, they did. Well, not only that, David, they also violated the breach of contract.
Exactly.
Because, see, that's when you can prove that they violated a breach of contract, which was the same scenario with all these fraudulent foreclosures. Oh, yeah, and that's another thing. Remember, to our listeners that are new on the call, the banks, when they brought all these fraudulent foreclosures into court, they did not bring in original paperwork. Oh, no. What they did was they made a copy. Catch that word, copy. They claimed that they made a copy off of the original, and they brought a copy of the original into court. Excuse me, it's a copy. And if they
not evidence.
That's right. And if they don't bring the original paperwork into court, guess what? Null and void.
Mm-hmm.
You can say, I'm sorry, but that is not a copy, because anybody that does electronically photocopy of a document, that document can be altered.
And including alleged warrants, they have to be done by a grand jury, and they have to be signed by a grand jury before a judge could sign it. And when you go to these courts, this is the point when you go to court where you're dealing with your mortgage, you're technically supposed to go in a grand jury structure in a court of 12 jurors, not 6. 6 is maritime. 12 is lawful.
And here's another good...
They violate that every day of the week.
They sure do.
Mm-hmm.
They sure do. Here's another good kicker. Remember, when you go into court, now I'm talking about those that are addressing and trying to save themselves from losing their property as to your home. Remember, when you go into court, you are the appointee. And what are you going to bring into court and talk about? You're going to talk about the trust. See, what the courts do, or these lawsuits, meaning the plaintiff, if you're the defendant, what they do is they're bringing you into court under a promissory note. Well, now you know a promissory note has no value unless, of course, they attach the instrument to it that shows where the money's at and shows that you actually received those funds. Now, if they can show that pertaining to the promissory note, well, then they would have standing. Unfortunately, they didn't do that. What they did is they brought you into court only on the promissory note. They did not bring the instrument into court. Well, I think you know the answer to that. The reason why they didn't, because that would show fraud. Because you didn't receive that money because your signature has to be on the countersigned signature specimen's name, by his name, that you had actually received that money from the bank. They're sure not going to bring that one into court because you'd nail them on that one. So what you do is you say, well, wait a minute, I'm here pertaining to the trust. And by the way, where's the witnesses for me to talk to as to me deposing the witnesses who are supposed to be here to testify pertaining to the claim as was brought upon me? Now, the funny thing is, all these claims that went into court regarding these fraudulent foreclosure claims, not one word is mentioned about the trust. So that's what you talk about. Oh, I'd like to see the trust. Well, I'm here in reference to the trust. Judge, I'm afraid to say this, but nothing was brought up about the trust. Judge is going to go back and she's going to say, well, you know what? She's the person's right. You're not talking about the trust. You're talking about the promissory note.
Mm-hmm.
Case dismissed, man, because, you know, that's what you're going to challenge the judge on, and, of course, you're going to challenge the opposing party because you're here to testify about the trust. The trust has to do with the money, the instrument. Who was the trustee? Now, the trustee can't sue you. Remember, I told you that. The trustee can't sue you because that's the bank. They're holding the note to your property. They are the trustee to the trust. You get it? So you go to court and you say, well, I'm here as the appointee, and then, of course, now the opposing attorney is going to say, well, wait a minute, what do you mean by you're here as the appointee? Well, I'm here in reference to the trust. I'm here to question the trust. And they're going to freak out.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Also, Michelle, there has to be 2 signatures in the negotiation on this alleged contract,
That's
which
right.
one of those, in retrospect, that's supposed to be present is the bank president, as this alleged signing, which is only one signature being signed at that time.
That is correct, and that is correct, and what you're referring to as to the signature has to do with the instrument. And if your signature is not on the instrument as to and it would be a counter. In other words, it's called a counter signature because what you're doing is the bank signs the instrument, and then you sign the same instrument as claiming you received those funds, meaning the money. Well, that's why the bank.
Michelle, you now, since they are coming in against you, you can file a counterclaim against them.
That is exactly right. And how you're going to do that, guys? Very simple. You're going to file your identity theft claim to the IRS. Get it? Now you are a victim to identity theft.
You are the crime victim corpus delicti.
Correct. As to your identity being stolen.
You are the crime victim corpus delicti.
Now here's the other good news. Remember, the only party who can sue you is the name on the instrument itself.
In wet ink.
That is correct, in wet ink. Now remember, they didn't bring that part into court, now did they? All they brought was that promissory note into court. And they're claiming that promissory note's got value and and it's got standing and all this and that. Really? I hate to say this, but you know what? It doesn't have any standing if it's not got the other paperwork attached to it pertaining to the instrument. And the reason why that is because they don't have it.
And the one thing you want to do before you go to these kangaroo courts, especially when you're dealing with this, file in the court for the attorney that is representing the bank to bring the bank's, what do they call that, charter in laws in, because the law says that any attorney has to bring in the charter and instruments of the opposing party when attorney represents. That's John F. Kennedy's case. And now, so you request that, and when you request that, they don't want to bring in the bank charter in, because if you ever read the bank charter, you're going to find out it's a scam anyways, because they put the bank charter in to protect them and you. And so when you read it, it protects both parties, but the insurance is in the bank's charters.
And guess what else, guys? That falls under dog Latin. Now, dog Latin is a fancy word by meaning that they're saying one thing and contradicting another.
That's so like pig Latin.
Or, well, I say dog Latin, and it can be pig Latin. Okay, pig Latin too.
No, but I'm just
very true. So these are things you're going to have to. In other words, you don't have to be a rocket science to figure this out. And it's not all that complicated, and it's not as hard as you think it is. All you have to do is just look up these things, and put an affidavit together, and bingo, you got them, Not
only that, when you read the federal bank charters yourself and start realizing a lot of it is written by attorneys, but they have to keep the basics, and most of it, a 5th and 7th grade, could read it and comprehend it.
Well, here's the thing, just like you were pointing out earlier, Ed. Remember, what did the banks do? The banks gave you a promissory note. And as soon as you signed the promissory note, just like we were claiming, pertaining to our bond, okay? Now, if this isn't fraud, I don't know how to say it any clearer. But when the banks took your promissory note with your signature on it, they had immediately paid off your mortgage on your bond, meaning under your name.
Your birth certificate.
That's correct. Now, that's where the identity theft comes into play.
And double dipping, more than tripled, 5 times.
Sure they did, because what they did is they took the mortgage after because remember,
500%.
That's what's called a securitization. And the bank cannot transfer your mortgage or your note until it was securitized. Once the note became securitized, lawfully now, the bank can do a transfer. And when the bank did the transfer on the securitized note, the bank is allowed to make money off your note. But what the bank didn't tell you was, even though they paid off the mortgage, what did they do? They fraudulently and lawfully took your money, which has true value, right? Money, the green stuff that's in your pockets. So if you take out that dollar bill, that's why it says note on the dollar bill. That means you're promising to give back the dollar bill that you have in your wallet back to the bank. Now, that should explain it pretty much how it works. And you can even use that method in if you have to go to court on it.
Yeah, and that's intentional fraud.
Absolutely, because what did the banks do? When they asked you to pay back the loan, they wanted an interest on that loan. So what did that interest pertain to? Oh, you tell me, because it all varies, but it could be from anywhere from 20% to 30% interest.
May I?
Yeah, sure.
Also, this is Dr. Dina, the other half of Dr. Claude. One thing that we found also, once they securitize the mortgage, they basically have changed it from a loan to a security, which you can never be both. You are either a loan or a security, so they cannot be both. So that's another breach that they did.
Oh, that's a good point. Oh, absolutely. So now you know why it's important to fill out the IRS form. In other words, let's use the agencies against other agencies. Why not? After all, that's what they're there for, right? And here's another thing. As soon as you fill out the IRS form and you claim identity theft through the IRS, do you honestly think that these lawyers and these judges are going to play around with you? Absolutely not. Because when you file an IRS claim as you being a victim to identity theft, remember, they were part of it. They don't want nothing to do with it. Because the IRS has to do something, can't just brush it off. And that's why they don't want to mess around with the IRS. It also proves what you were claiming. Now, let's think about that. Because once you file your IRS form as you being a victim to an identity theft, now I haven't done it yet, but I'm fixing to do it. I'm waiting to get my green card because, like I said, I sent it to certified mail. But I'm fixing to take my IRS form and my evidence that I had attached to it. I'm fixing to march my little tail right to the sheriff's department, my local sheriff's department, and file a criminal complaint.
Good for you.
Because after all, they were jerking my chain around and they were saying, oh, it's a civil matter. Oh, really? I don't think it's a civil matter anymore now. What do you think? I have an IRS form here that just, acknowledged my letter, and I have the receipt. You think I'm going to lie to the IRS officer? I don't think so. Oh, and guess what else you can do? You can file a claim. Make sure you use the word claim. And besides using the word claim, it's a copy. Oh, I got to go back and look at my verbiage. I'll have to get on next call. I'll have that stuff ready for, in other words, outlined better, where I can go into more detail. But there's some certain words that I have discovered today, just simple words that we have to use when we address the court that changes the status as to our documentation and our paperwork upon the court. And that's what David and I had discovered today. And we haven't had a chance to really sit down and put, a summary together so that way we could kind of go over it word by word with you on the call today. It's just something we just learned. But here's something I want to read to you.
We can probably do this next week if all goes well. Michelle and I are in the process of writing several complaints up to the IRS relating to different issues which need to be addressed. And by the way, what I wanted to tell you, and I forgot earlier, was that whenever you go into these forms, the 14039 and the 211, you want to make a copy. Just print out a copy of it so that you can sit down and visually look it over and comprehend what it's saying. Now, I personally looked at that and said, I have never seen such fraud by trickery in my life. Because they address you as a taxpayer. Okay, now, when was the last time you paid taxes? Okay, that is a leading question. You have the right not to testify against yourself. Okay.
Ooh, good point.
And another thing is, okay, you're telling me that I have income. Isn't that what I'm paying as an income tax? Well, why do you not define income on this form as ruled by the Supreme Court of the United States?
Good point.
Income tax is a result of corporate activity, and wage for labor is an exchange. No income is generated. So how can you pay income tax, on wage for labor? You can't.
Good point.
Cannot do that. So the supposed income tax only applies to businesses and corporations where there is actually something sold for profit or converted for profit.
And that is so true. And that's why, see, remember, when we do this, we're using them against each other. And by doing that, and of course that's why you have to do your homework, but by doing that, you're somewhat playing into the system, and of course that's where the conversion comes into play, and you have to kind of understand what I mean by that. And look it up. But you're absolutely correct, David. And remember, the bond is the insurance. The bond is the insurance. The bond is the trust pertaining to the insurance companies or the insurance policies. That is the bond. So the bond, there's many types of bonds.
Real quick, I issued a letter and put it on Facebook to the White House website, and I put, whereas the IRS is a division of the IMF, unregistered foreign agents, diversified metal products, versus IRS case number CV93-405E, U.S. District Court. And it says but for some reason, I don't know if that's Indiana, Iowa, whatever. But anyway, the Public Law 94-564, Senate Report 94, 1148, page 5967, Reorganization Act, or Plan number 26, Public Law 102-391, are illegally placing a tax lien on me without due process of law. I demand to be removed immediately by executive order for the following reasons. Based on unrebutted affidavits to the Congress and the one Supreme Court, 18 U.S.C. 1001, which means obstruction, I make the following claims. Claim 1. 1895, the one Supreme Court ruled income tax is unconstitutional. Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company, 157 U.S. 429, 422, 555, 556, 573, 582, and 589. Claim number 2, 1920, Eisner versus McCumber, 252 U.S. 189, 206. Congress cannot, by any definition it may adopt, conclude what income is, since it, by legislation, cannot alter the Constitution from which it derives its power to legislate, and within whose limitation alone that power can be lawfully exercised. Claim 3, Stratton versus Baltic Mining, 240 U.S. 103. Wages are not income within the meaning of the Income Tax Amendment to the Constitution or any other provision of the Constitution. Claim 4, 1913, Stratton Independence versus Hobart, 231 U.S. 339. The lawful definition of income for all tax legislation: the gain derived from capital, from labor, or both combined, provided include the profit gained from the sale of a capital asset. Now, did you catch that?
I did.
Okay. Now, Claim 5, U.S. versus Lloyd R. Long, Federal District Court, Tennessee, case number CR-1-93-91, 10/15/1993. Notice the date, 1993. Okay? Not guilty.
Wow.
Verdict by the federal jury. Why? The 16th Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment to the 1776 ratified 1779 Constitution of the United States was never lawfully ratified. The IMF-IRS guilty of tax fraud, counterfeiting tax debt, mail fraud, extortion by mail, collusion to commit tax fraud, RICO Act, violation of 44 USC Paperwork Reduction Act at 3512 Public Protection, and the case on that is U.S. versus Lawrence, case number 06CR10019, 2005. Lawrence not guilty, whereas the IRS failed to inform Lawrence he was not required to fill out their forms, meaning the 1040, whatever, 1099, whatever crap they put out. Claim 6. Income taxes are voluntary. February the 3rd, 1953, in a hearing before the Committee on Ways and Means, House of Representatives, Internal Revenue Investigation Statement under oath by Dwight E. Avis, ATF, which is Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and Robert B. Ritter, Assistant ATF Director, Tax Legal Division, Bureau of the Internal Revenue, page 13, quote, "Let me point this out now. Your income tax is 100% voluntary tax, and your liquor tax is 100% enforcement tax. The situation is as different as day and night. No challenges." Claim 7, IRS Form 1040 has no standing in law. U.S. Lear versus USA, January 05, the Federal District Court in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Claim 8, in the unrebutted affidavit, I produced some 60 key case rulings of the one Supreme Court not found either in the U.S. Code or IRS Code equals intentional fraud. These rulings are posted to my Facebook website, Tax Fraud in America. I also find it interesting that the lawful definition of income, see lines 16 and 18, is not found in either the U.S. Code or IRS Code. Claim 9, Congress cannot define income, see lines 19, 20 through 22. What incompetent jackass is defining it? Do we now just ignore the rulings of this nation's highest court? Claim 10, the one Supreme Court ruled that tax for Social Security was unconstitutional for the American worker, but not for the corporate business. You cannot tax wage for labor as income. Therefore, an employee cannot be taxed to pay for Social Security. Claim 11, 2005, Schultz versus IRS, Second Circuit Court of Appeals, New York City, New York, case number 04-0196-CV. No action can be taken against a supposed taxpayer without first taking them to court. The IRS, IMF, began their unlawful activity against me in July 2005. That was 6 months after the ruling in Schultz versus IRS. I then submitted to the IRS agent affidavit and Emerald, which they refused to answer, thus establishing a true bill and invoice. Since 2005, I have been billing and invoicing the IRS monthly, and they have refused to pay. They now owe me $9,399,492.51 default. I fully expect payment. IRS agents are trained in code, not law, and are therefore idiots by making blank statements relating to what is frivolous, trivial, and silly. I responded, what part of this is frivolous? They hung up on me, called back, what law requires me to pay this tax? Up again. Remedy, whereas the IRS, IMF, choose to ignore the rulings of the one Supreme Court of this nation, I consider them as terrorists, bullies, hate mongers, engaging in crimes against humanity, who are working for a cult-driven religion. They, being ignorant in law, consider the Treaty of 1213 still in existence, when in fact the treaty died with the Pope in 1215, with his death having no heirs or successors. This letter will be handed over to the one Supreme Court, Department of Justice, etc., etc., etc. So there you have it, a complete confrontation with the President of the United States making claims of tax fraud.
Yeah.
This applies to every bloodline American.
Mm-hmm. And I like to add one thing, too. Type in on yahoo.com, or not Yahoo, but YouTube. Go to the IRS where it says, IRS Commission Stephen Miller says income tax is voluntary. This is admission into Congress record, exhibit .05.051. And you'll watch your senators and congressmen say, well, I pay taxes, but they're admitting that you don't have to pay it. And the reason why they have to pay taxes by law is because they're getting a de facto dollar, and we do have the court cases that we filed in our filings, because they have to pay it because it's a de facto dollar.
It's under 6331, right in the IRS code. They have to pay it.
That is so true. Oh, no.
Hang on a minute, Michelle. I'm sitting there explaining this to you guys, so you can go on and watch Congress. You can watch the IRS directors, administration. They say this, and if you recall, back in 1980, the IRS agents that were convicted, or trying to convict, let me correct my statement, where the jury came out and clearly stated that these men and women were right. U.S. Today ran a full-page ad in 1980, and it was $50,000 if anybody could prove that there was an IRS code that says that we, the bloodline, have to lawfully pay. So watch it. Learn.
Yeah, that was also, Ed, that was also on C-SPAN, believe it or not.
Yes, it was, yes, and it was on a lot of other stations, too, because people were freaked out because they're like, oh, my God, and then I'm going to explain to you. The reason why Al Capone was convicted of tax fraud, all right, is because he signed a tax statement said that these were his taxes. If Al Capone never signed anything with taxes, the jury could not convict him.
Another thing, Freedom Law School in California has a $350,000 award out if anybody can prove there's a law that requires you to pay it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, then we got a may I. Go ahead, may I.
May I, Dr. Dina, there is a documentary out. I believe you can also still obtain it on YouTube that's called Freedom to Fascism, which was put together by Aaron Russo. He clearly convinces and shows all evidence regarding the tax fraud and that there is no actual law. And that's what started a lot of the actual tax, I would say, representatives. They actually quit because there was no law. They were going to claim that $50,000 that we're talking about, and they couldn't find the law. No one presented it even to this day. So if you check Freedom to Fascism on YouTube, there's a complete documentary by Aaron Russo, who's now deceased, that will totally show you all the evidence and research on that. Thank you.
I think we have it. I think we do have it on Oregon Tracker site. And I know his brother because I have had contact with his brother off and on. And this is the point that, you really need to pay attention to what is going on. You don't have to believe anything we say. We are not attorneys. We are not lawyers. We are just men and women that actually did research on this, who paid attention to what's really going on compared to what the mainstream media is trying to convince you. Because, see, the mainstream media, newspapers, it's like in our county, all right? The newspaper don't write the articles anymore for the county commissioners and that. They actually have a pressman in the government and all the agencies, city, county, and state, that actually write the press releases for the media. So you have to realize that 80% of the media today is handed a script by elected and public servants because these people are on the payroll. Because if you didn't pay the structure where they could sit there and claim to write it off in taxes on themselves or claim the funding, because when you pay your water, electricity bill, that goes in to a structure that is supposed to go back to we the people in dividend checks because we own the structure. They say that they privatize these structures, but it's like Social Security or the post office. When they privatize that, they couldn't give authority to them, but it's still under the Constitution, but they have administrative rules for those agencies. And that's where we and David posted up, because the Social Security is actually a constitutional right for lawful Americans, and that's where I posted in our letter that we put out for our talk show, and that was done in 1937. So go ahead.
I'm going to, also, regarding what we're talking about, I also came across some more material that I had just shared with David and Ed too, and they can put that on their, the links right on their what do you call it, the Oregon,
Tracker.
Thank you, Oregon Tracker's website.
I might also point out, Michelle, at this time that I attended the hearing on taxation in Washington, D.C. in March 2002, and this is available on video and DVD from We the People Foundation for Constitutional Education out of Pennsylvania.
Awesome.
If any of you are interested in getting that, I don't know what the cost is now. It was $23. I don't know if it's more than that now or not. I don't know. But anyway, I attended that hearing, and the testimony, we invited the IRS, Congress, the President to attend, and we gave them 300 questions prior to the hearing, so they had plenty of time to look it up and be prepared to answer the people's questions. We do have the right, as a people, to redress of grievance. But yet our public and elected officials never bothered to show up. What does that tell you?
That tells you that
all 300 questions.
That tells me that they knew that you had them by you know where, and they couldn't come back and dispute it.
That's correct.
They just made themselves look guilty. Here's some. I remember I was trying to think of the word, simple words that when we are addressing our documentation as to the court or whoever we're addressing it to, especially the court or the corporation. Let's put it that way. You want to address it as a public record. Now, I didn't realize. You think, well, why is that? But the word public record has a lot of pull when it comes to the courts. Because if you just say public notice, affidavit public notice, da-da-da-da-da, okay, well, it's a notice. But when you say affidavit public record, changes the whole scenario.
And you know one thing, Michelle, people don't comprehend? How you can make it a really public record besides hanging it up in the city and county and the Secretary of State's building and, you know, the county clerk, is you register it and file it with the museums, state and county. State and county museums can only deal with facts.
Oh, that's a good point, Ed.
But that one I hadn't thought of, Ed.
Oh, I do that. That's what freaks people out.
Our constitutional criminal complaint. Remember that document, Ed?
Not only that, it's filed in the Salem Museum itself.
Are you talking about the
filed
instrument?
in the records of Salem Museum.
Are you talking about the instrument, the latest one, or you haven't done that one yet?
No, the one that we just did, I haven't done because I just got them all back from the post office. And I even got back some from the post office from Social Security with their own stamps on it. Because apparently I got somebody in the post office in my community on the side of their system. They're panicking. So the post office sent everything back, and they sent me a law, too. And the one thing I got to call the postmaster tomorrow because it says in the law that the disabled, handicapped, and blind can mail stuff free. That's federal law.
I never knew that.
I'll even give you the code to look up.
Well,
See,
you know what?
They don't want you to know because they go that, you have to be a nonprofit to do this stuff. You have to do this stuff. And that's not exactly true.
I agree.
So anyhow, the actual deal, certain mail sent by members, certain material by or for, you get this, certain matters by or for the blind and handicapped, see 703.5.0.
Very true.
And so
Good
these
point.
people, they know in the community, they personally know in this community that I'm disabled, that's been published in the newspapers for 15 years in a local paper.
Wow. Well, and you know, the good news is in commerce, truth is sovereignty.
Mm-hmm.
Truth is expressed in the form of an affidavit. And
if you lie on it, you're liable.
Oh, that's right. You
But you have to say that
lie.
to people. So you have to be honorable when you put this stuff in the affidavit, and you want to be able to put it in reference to whatever you're referring to.
Absolutely. And and an unrebutted affidavit stands as truth in commerce.
Mm-hmm.
No matter if you lied, if they didn't catch it.
I'm sorry, what was that, David?
Say if you lied and they didn't catch it, it's truth.
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly right. And an unrebutted...
True. I want to bring up one point. Dave, what does it say in the Constitution about lawful bloodline Americans? Article what?
Article 2.5 is the establishment of the bloodline American. It's under just before the oath of office, the qualifications of president.
And that includes all public officials, because you have to be born on this soil to be in office.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the funny, you know what's funny? When you go back now and you look at the Constitution, because now that we're bringing things to, our attention, when you go back and you look at the Constitution, it says lawful national American or national American, meaning that you have to lawfully be from this soil in order to run for those positions.
That's right.
And not only that, it clearly states by law, 1884 Supreme Court says you could be born on this soil. This is where everybody goes, the anchor baby crap. You could be born on this soil, but you're not an inhabitant. Inhabitant means bloodline. Look it up in English law.
Oh, that's a good point, Ed.
How can you? Well, yes, you could, because if your parents have only been here 2 generations and you're born, you're still not a bloodline American.
Mm-hmm. And I argue with people all the time on the phone and emails and Facebook on this. And then I found out that half the guys I was arguing with, and I mean mainly guys, they're from Canada trying to say, well, we have the North American Trade Union that, Clinton passed. Excuse you, the North American Trade Union is a corporation structure, and they were trying to open up the highways from Mexico to Canada going through California, Oregon, and Washington. And so we've been attacking that since 2000.
Right, and that North American trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, I went down to New Orleans and protested that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the good news, guys, because, everybody's probably thinking, well, how can I handle this, and how can I get ahead, and what can I do, and da-da-da-da-da. Well, here's the easy and the good news. All you have to do is address an affidavit, okay? Affidavit of truth. And of course, that would be, and like we're all saying in the affidavit, you don't lie, you tell the truth. And if you're not sure about something, then you would use the term like it appears, so that way they can't sue you and hold you accountable.
Hold
for
you
certain
liable.
Things. correct, liable for certain things. So you know, if you're not sure about something, just say then it appears, or you just come right out and say, well, I'm not quite sure on certain things. But the bottom line is when you address an affidavit and you present it in as a copy of record in the court, remember, if they don't address it and they don't come back and rebut it, well, an unrebutted affidavit stands as truth in commerce.
And remember, your courts are commercial courts.
It also stands for an unrebutted affidavit becomes the judgment in commerce. So, if they don't come back and rebut it as to your affidavit, it stands for truth. And remember, there's only a certain amount of days that they have to do that because there's statutes in the law pertaining to that too. So,
file this into a court of record, and the court of record
right.
refuses to answer it within 10 days, they accept it.
That's correct. So guess what? Now you got something to go on because they didn't dispute your claim. You follow me where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So if they didn't dispute your claim, well, guess what? Now you have standing for a lawsuit.
If I may, you can go back to court and get a summary judgment.
There you go.
Right.
Bingo.
And the one thing that people need to realize that everybody goes, oh, we need to do a class action lawsuit.
No.
Remember, you do a class action lawsuit, they can throw the entire thing out with everyone. Now, if everybody filed their own individual lawsuit on the same subject, and they threw out 70% of them or 80% of them, and 20% went through, the rest of the 80% are guaranteed. They can't dispute it.
Well, here's another good pointer. Why do you think, and think about this, why do you think our senators and our governors don't address a lawsuit upon the court? Instead, they address petitions. And guess what? When you have so many people to back up your petition, well, that means you can bypass the courts, and then it goes in front of Congress, right, for a vote.
Right, but that has to be done lawfully, not legally.
That is correct. That's correct. So what you do is if you want to get serious, or if we want to get serious, we draft up a form, and we address it as a petition.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a question.
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry. What you were just speaking of about the unrebutted affidavit stands as truth in commerce, and you said that unrebutted affidavit becomes a judgment in commerce.
That's correct.
I mailed in motions to the North Dakota Supreme Court, and actually, roughly a month and a half ago, I was up there personally. And
you're breaking up, ma'am.
I'm sorry. In person, I handed to the Supreme Court clerk my motion or my affidavit and everything, and she says she's not allowed to accept anything from me, and I have her on audio recording. I recorded it. She went round and round with me. And
let me tell you how to get around that. This is the point that people do not get this. Before you go in and want to get stuff stamped, okay, one thing is you send it registered certified first. Then you go into the court and just have them stamp it, and you pay your 25 cents per page. You get it back stamped by the court. And then you have it stamped by the court. Then you can enter it in a record because you already sent it certified. Now the court clerk already stamped stamped it. That's at the window. You want it stamped, and you want them stamped each and every page. And I've done this, and I do this. Okay? And then when I hand it into the record of the court, they can't dispute it because it was already entered in the clerk that already did it. And it's not the clerk of the court, it's the clerk of the administration court. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Pardon me.
Go ahead. We got a part of me. Maybe he's got a point that we don't see. Go ahead, part of me.
29 minutes until the...
Oh, yeah, I got you on that one. We got a half hour left. Go ahead.
I yield.
I want to clarify something here with the caller. Well, first of all, I'm not sure. I don't have everything what you did. You might have been in the wrong jurisdiction. So you have to make sure you're in the right jurisdiction as to what you're doing. And because I'm not sure what all you have done and what you were trying to do, I can't answer to that. But
yeah, because we don't know the case.
You're in the correct. So you have to make sure you're in the right jurisdiction. Now, if you went to the federal court, for instance, see, you have to have a federal violation. In order to bring your claim into federal court, you have to have proof that your rights were violated upon
criminal charges
under the federal laws. Like, for instance, if your due process rights were violated upon, then you would have a right to be in federal court.
Right. No, I didn't do that. I tried that, and they threw it out. Federal court threw it out. And
correct. Did you respond back to them after they allegedly threw it out and said, here's the facts, why didn't you go over the facts instead of what you assumed? I'm just throwing a thought out here. I'm not picking on you because I don't know either.
Right. No, I understand. Yeah, I get that. Right, and I didn't know what to do after that, and I missed a couple of calls here, and I was just lost. So this was supposed to go to the district court. Judge up there says I cannot file in any district court because I brought a claim against him.
District courts are run by the British government, a foreign court system.
Okay. So then
were you aware of that?
Dakota, I know that they have their hands in it. I guess I didn't know that particularly. So I went to the North Dakota State Supreme Court, which is the Court of Appeals, and that clerk flat would not accept my paperwork. And I went round and round with her. I recorded her. I was very kind and respectful, but I was forceful, and I said no.
She was warned before you got there.
Well, yeah, she was told by the Supreme Court judges to not accept anything from me.
Right, because if they accepted it, you had actual facts that they were terrified of.
Yes,
but
so I have been warring with them for some time, and she would not take it. Finally, I verbally arm wrestled her into accepting it, and she stamped the top page as received, but would not stamp it filed.
No, I've got that because, see, I've got that by the Secretary of State that we've got a lot of stuff received. But remember, when they stamp it received, even though it's not stamped filed, it's received, so it's recorded.
Can I ask you a question, Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am. This is Angie.
Angie?
I know it's Angie. I know. Go ahead.
Okay. The problem is, Angie, is in order for us, or for me to help you more thoroughly, I kind of have to know more, like what the case was about. Was this was a civil matter? I take it.
It's a children's issue.
Okay, so this has to do. Okay, so so you're talking about family court.
Yes, initially it was. Yes, it is.
Right, but see, family court. This is where people get confused. Everybody goes, "Oh, I got to go through family court." No, you don't. Family court is a fictitious. That's like what they're doing with children today, where the children have to go through a juvenile court. Now, in the state of Oregon and most states right now, they're making children at the age of 12 to get a hunting and fishing license. They're making sure that at the age of 12, they're registered in the state. That is federally illegal so long as the bloodline is lawful. Now, if it's legal, they can do that.
Right.
Well, that's true. But let's keep on topic here, because if we bounce around, Ed, then it gets confusing for what we're trying to do.
No, I know that. And Angie, what we'll do is I'll send your link to the others, and we'll get friend, and then we'll set up a night where we can go through this whole structure, if that makes sense.
That would be wonderful. And I have been sending claims and such, and I've sent them via the certified registered return receipt mail, and I have all the green cards here, and it goes nowhere. I have everything.
Yeah, but see,
here.
the main point is you send yourself, all right, an envelope for you to autograph that, all right, to put in with that, because you have an envelope now that's sealed, that you know the evidence in it. You put it in an evidence bag with their evidence, received with your evidence. So when it does go to court, you're sealing the envelope. So that way, when the envelope's sealed, this is like what the police do and attorneys do when they do envelope or evidence. Okay? And once it's sealed, the only way it can be opened in a jury trial.
Well, they won't let me in no matter what I've tried to date.
Angela,
yeah.
I don't know.
Angie, yeah.
Or, excuse me, Angie. I know Ed knows more about your case than I do, but here's what I'm just going to throw some things at you, and you can jot them down, and then you can go over this with Ed, and maybe he can help you. If you are dealing with the judge, for instance, and the judge is not entering your evidence on the record, or the judge is giving you the runaround, okay, as to what you're trying to do, what I would recommend you to do is you want to file a claim against the judge as the judge being biased against you. Now, when you file a claim against the judge,
and his bar license.
Excuse me?
And his bar license. All judges have a bar license.
You can enter the bar license into it. So when you file a bias claim against the judge, now what that does, Angie, is it gives you some avenue here, because once you file a bias claim against the judge, you can claim, and your reasons can be that first of all, you feel you're not getting justified fairly, right? Secondly, you can also claim that you feel threatened from that legal system, or from that court, or from that judge, because of the way the judge is handling your affairs. Okay, so what you do is you file a claim against the judge for being biased against you and for not allowing you to introduce your evidence upon the court pertaining to your case. Once you do that, and of course it's 10 days. You give the judge 10 days, to comply to your request, or the court, I should say, to reply to your request. Then what you can also do is you can file another notice, which is called a notice of removal. Now, what you can do is you can, a notice of removal means that you want to transfer your case from that court's district to a different court. And you can use your due process rights as being violated upon. Now, guess what? Once you feel and you can prove that your due process rights have been violated upon, now you have a cause to go forward and put it in federal court.
Oh, I can prove this. I'll give you one instance just to put this all in a little nutshell. The opposing side brought forward, forever ago, saying, we want to limit and restrict her access to the court. And I was given 14 days to respond. I hand-delivered my response the very next day to the clerk. And the clerk said, well, I have to ask the judge if you're allowed to file.
Right. See, what she's being right there is she's cutting you off because the judge is terrified that you might have something that might hold them liable to his bond.
Correct.
So, I've been arm wrestling with these guys for a very long time. So then Dirk Wagon wouldn't let me do anything, so I had him served by the sheriff my claim against him. And following the help that I was getting at that time, and I did a claim, trespass against me, trespass my rights, I had him serve this. So then he filed an order 6 days later saying I cannot file anything into any district court without his permission.
Yeah, but see, we're talking district courts of that county. Okay, the state court is not it depends on what state court you go to, is not a district court. And the other point, you want to stay away from that. You want to file it in the federal court.
Well, here's something, too, I want to bring to your attention. When you're looking at your court documents, because this is very important, okay?
Uh-huh.
Here's what's happening, and this is what people have to comprehend. A lot of the paperwork that you're getting from the clerk of the court, or you believe it's coming from the clerk of the court, here's what's going on. The attorneys, what they do is they walk into the courthouse and they have the clerk of the court stamp their papers. Then they leave the courthouse, and then what they do is they go to their office, meaning the attorneys, they go to their lawful firm, and then they type up those forms and the papers that you're receiving. Now, you're thinking that those papers that you're receiving are coming from the court, when in fact they're not. They're coming from the attorney.
Sure.
What you have to do is you have to look at those forms or the paperwork you're receiving, and especially when it's a court order by the clerk of the court or from the judge. Now, if it's coming from the clerk of the court, as they're claiming, where the clerk signs her name, you want to see if there is a court stamp seal next to her signature. You also want to look and see if there's a court seal stamp next to the judge's name.
Never.
There you go.
Never.
Bingo. Okay.
Never have seen one.
That's correct. Now they're going to argue with you, and these attorneys are going to argue with you, and these lawyers are going to say the same thing, that they don't have to do that as long as there's a court seals or, stamp, meaning that it was entered in the court of record, that's all that they have to have. The answer is no, that's not true. Because anybody can walk into the courthouse and have it stamped. Does not mean that paper was modified.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? Just like you walked into the courtroom and you were arguing with the clerk of the court. You wanted her to stamp it, and and she finally stamped it. Okay, she stamped it. But the thing is, when you take your papers into court and you have the clerk of the court stamp them, you want to have them entered in as evidence, not just entered into the court of record.
Okay.
And you have to put evidence on it.
Okay.
Correct.
And you have to put that you're the corpus delicti on it.
Okay.
So you want
to let me.
No, you're missing a point.
You don't do this verbally. You're not going to do this verbally with them. You're going to type up your paperwork, and you're going to put on there, verbally type it on in other words, it's going to be typed. And then here's what else you're going to do. Now, when you do up your paperwork, you're going to do it up in an affidavit form. Now, here's what you do. You take your affidavit form, what you're trying to prove, okay? Because remember, an affidavit stands for truth. So that's why we always say, whatever you do in an affidavit, God forbid, don't lie, because that'll come back and bite you in the butt. Now, but you're going to do it in an affidavit form. Now, you take your affidavit form. You're going to go get it notarized. Now, David brought something up to my attention that I was not aware of, and I'm going to give it to you. You're going to have your affidavit form notarized 3 times. In other words, you're going to have an affidavit typed up for a notary, and you're going to have it where it can be witnessed by 3 notaries. You follow me?
Okay.
So you're going to have it's going to be one application, but you're going to have it witnessed by 3 different notaries.
Okay, I'll have to go to 3 counties.
Now, you want to know why I'm telling you to do that? And I'm sure David's on the call, and he'll tell you why.
Because he's getting ready to tell you. That's what he was doing, but go ahead.
Oh, what that stands for is 3 notaries is like a judge, being witnessed as by a judge. Am I correct on that, David?
Correct. And if they do not obey that, you can go back to those 3 notaries, and you can use those 3 notaries to serve that document on them in contempt of court.
Now, if you really are having a hard time with your case, you can petition the court But you have to really know what you're doing, okay? That means you have to really study, and you have to do your paperwork up and get it ready. But you can actually challenge the court, and when I mean challenge the court, I mean you're going to petition the court, you're going to petition the judge or the judges who were involved, and you're going to put them in their place. Now, when you petition the court, that means you're pointing out all their faults.
Yeah.
But you have to really have your stuff in your evidence together. And now what I would recommend now, the next time you go into court, see, I always have 3 copies, and I always have an extra one made up as an original copy for me. So when I give for instance, a copy that I want to go to the judge, because you don't have to have 2 copies from the clerk of the court, but you definitely want 2 copies as an original that goes to the judge. So what I usually do is I make 2 originals that I'm as to me addressing the judge, and when I give that document, that instrument, to the clerk of the court, I say to the clerk of the court, these are 2 originals that I want you to stamp. One is for me as an original, and one is for the judge. And then, of course, the second one is the same copy of the document or instrument, but that one goes to the clerk of the court. And then the other one, which is the third one, goes to the parties that you are addressing as to you being the defendant, and unless you're the plaintiff. Okay? So that's how I do it.
Okay, so you're saying to file it. How do I go about
filing it?
A problem. I've given myself a problem in that I now live in Colorado and no longer North Dakota. My case is there.
Yeah, okay, then what you have to do is you have to go to the court's website, the court that you were addressing. Yeah. And there are standard forms on the court's website. You need to learn how to use the court's website because there's a lot of information on there to your advantage. Now, you have to file a claim as a change of venue. And you specify that you have moved, you no longer live in that jurisdiction, and I don't see a problem with a change as to change in venue. And then, of course,
I tried that and I was denied because they said that's the jurisdiction that the child is in. Matter of fact, I tried bringing it here, and they said no, they don't have jurisdiction because the child is up there. And I have fought, I have researched, I've tried to throw this judge out I don't know how many different times.
Well, let me ask you something. Are you filing notices of default?
No.
You have to file. You have to file when the judges screw up or the clerks of the court screw up. You have to file a notice of default on them.
Okay.
So if you're not filing notices of defaults on them, that's one of your problems.
Okay.
Now, normally,
I can mail that, but again, they are not. They're blocking everything I try in any way I try.
Then you need to file a notice of removal, as them being biased, then, and the courts being biased, and you feel threatened, and you have to explain that you feel threatened, and that you feel you're not going to get a fair hearing or a fair trial regarding that jurisdiction. So you're going to have to file
what jurisdiction do I want to offer that I want to go to then?
Actually,
you have to file it in the jurisdiction.
Violated here now, Michelle, so she can go direct to the Supreme Court.
I'm sorry. Well, I didn't catch all of that, David. I kind of stepped over you. Say that again, hon.
Since she is being denied her constitutional rights, that is a crime against her as a lawful bloodline American. She can go direct to the Supreme Court for an petition.
Well, here's the problem. Before she can do that, David, she has to have proof, and that's what she. You haven't done the proper things yet, so that's the problem. You have evidence on hand, but because you haven't done certain things pertaining to your evidence, in other words, you're in limbo. So you have to file. In other words, you have to file a motion of default against them. You have to file a notice of the.
Currently in state court.
Yeah, you have to. Right, she has to file in the jurisdiction that she is having a hard time with.
Okay.
What I would recommend,
since the judge has openly admitted that she cannot file.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. That's a bias claim right there.
You go down to the Supreme Court of your state, and you file with the chief judge.
Yes, sir. I've tried that.
Against this judge for being biased.
Yes, sir. I did that last year.
And what happened?
They won't let me file. Everything I filed was denied. My writs were denied. My request for recusal of that judge was denied, and the clerk signed the paperwork and said that with only the clerk's signature that I may not bring anything forth in there but a timely appeal.
Okay, then all right. If that's the case, then your next move is you have to file what's called a notice of removal. Now, when you file a notice of removal, you want to look up the address regarding the jurisdiction pertaining to federal court. What federal court is the nearest to you where you live? Okay.
Here in Colorado, they said they don't have jurisdiction because the defendants are in North Dakota and all of the acts were in North Dakota. So they threw it out.
That is correct. I'm afraid that's true. And so, in other words, where the crime was committed or where the claim was addressed, that is correct. You're going to have to go back to that jurisdiction.
Okay. So that's awesome. That's exactly where I needed this to go because I've been trying. Now, I did just send my initial paperwork. I need to check my mail if my green card came back. However, I'm having a heck of a time, and maybe somebody can point me out. Maybe I'm just overdoing this. But in the North Dakota Federal Court, it kept taking me to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. And then there's a federal court in Bismarck, yet there's no forms. There's like diddly for instructions. There was a diddly for information.
Let me ask you something. Is the case that you're referencing to, has it been closed?
No, not that I'm
ever been
aware of. Yes.
Okay, so it's still open. It's still pending.
Well, there's nothing going on with it. It's
because you haven't inserted it.
What was that, Ed?
She has not inserted it. They're keeping it open, hoping that she could come back.
Okay.
If they close the case, they're trying to say that you have nothing. If the case is still open, they're waiting for you to come back with a logical response. Now, I just passed her message to you, Michelle. Angie, you've got her information, on your messenger. So this way you guys could, throw some thoughts out.
Okay.
Did you send it on my personal page or the ranch page? I guess I should.
No, I put it on your personal page, and I sent it back and forth on Messenger, not on the walls.
Okay. Oh, gotcha. Okay, I will look that up. Yeah, because I have you, Ed, on the ranch page also.
I know that. I know that.
The reason why I asked that, because you might have good standing. In other words, you can file for an appeal. That's why I was asking you: is it still open, or is it pending, or was it closed?
Well, last it was just case was stated as reopened, and I've received nothing stating anything different at any time. But they're tickled pink because the others, you talk about affidavits and them being truthful. The other side has said nothing of any truth, and his attorney is a lying maggot straight from hell, and that's probably very, very redundant. But I kid you not, they took away my little girl without any hearing, and they will not let me into court.
Oh, you're okay. Well, then, you know what?
That's me.
Well,
wait a minute. Dave had a response here. Hang on a minute. Dave, go ahead.
I said that's kidnapping.
Yeah.
It is
absolutely.
They actually had my, took her away on an ex parte order. They never gave me a hearing. They sent cops in to infiltrate the home. There was 7-8 cops there at night, took a 5-year-old child, kept her in custody until my ex could come down there on my weekend, my regularly scheduled weekend to have her. And they sent all these cops to take this 5-year-old child away from us on an ex parte order. They illegally got a search warrant for my phone, and they followed me. The paper was not signed by anybody. I talked to the cop in North Dakota on the phone, and I'm like, you are out of your freaking mind. And he said, well, we have an order. We have to pick her up. If there's no order, you don't have the right to search my phone.
Well, even if they did have an order, the judge
has to be done by a grand jury, not a judge.
So
right,
and that's what you need to file. Where's the grand jury indictment? You know, this is what I mentioned before. You have to file and question, where is the grand jury involved on this decision? And the other point, I mentioned,
Not only that, but where I was going with that, because the judge already in other words, they already acted on it, and the judge went on hearsay.
Yeah.
When the judge filed that order.
We're going to have to shut the show down.
Correct.
So I passed the message back from everybody, so that way everybody knows what's going on.
Okay.
And then we'll hit this next week, because next week I do want to get into a little bit more, because I'm getting ready to write the stuff up for the recall. Okay, because when I put this recall on the governor, I know what they're going to attack me on more than one way. Okay, and see, this is the one thing that people need to accept when you're getting ready to speak against these people. Remember, they believe what they call their Bible, their structure, what they go to church, what their structure, what they pray to. And 80 to 90% of elected and public servants are members of every church or different breeds of church or religion. Okay, and this is where it comes down to First Amendment, where people say, well, I have a First Amendment right to my religion. Yes, you do. But your First Amendment does not mean you have a right to stand and tell everybody else what you believe in. Your First Amendment gives you the right to believe in your belief in your home. And if you want to sit there and do this with a public structure like a church, all right, it stays in the church property. It doesn't go public. See, this is the point. We've got to get back to the realization of what the Constitution means compared to what we're confused and derived for, if that makes sense. So, anyhow, I'm going to, Michelle, if you got a word, then hit it, and then Dave, and then I'll close.
All I'm going to say is when you do your affidavit heading, I would put it as affidavit public record. Okay. And then you go from there as to your heading.
Sure thing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I would like to thank
David, go ahead.
I would like to thank everyone for joining us tonight. We tried to stay more on point. We'd like your comments to see if you approve of the way we are trying to rearrange the show so that we do stay more on contact or on point. And if you are absolutely learning from our show, we would also appreciate those comments. You can post those to New Oregon Trackers on Facebook, and we will welcome your comments. And we're trying to make this a show that is better for your comprehension and education, so that your children can even comprehend what they need to know to survive in life. So study the forms. We'll put some more information on New Oregon Trackers for you to observe and where to go to find things. So keep in mind that New Oregon Trackers will be your go-to site. Okay? You also have tax fraud in America, by the way, for any income tax problems. Michelle has her own Facebook. I don't know if she wants that out or not, but I'll let her. That's up to her. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and with that, I will say good night.
Thank you. Anyhow, we would like to thank everybody for participating tonight. And the whole point of all this is about education, not just because of us, it's because of you. Because if we're not educating one another on the real truth of what's going on with the Vatican, the church, religion, because people have rights to their religion, but they don't have a right to preach it, to we the people. I mean, I'm not interested in other religions because I don't go by certain religions, and everybody knows that. But the point is I cannot go against somebody else who has a belief of their belief, and that is real. Because if we don't sit there and know the Constitution, how it was implied, the way it was written, the way it was instructed to protect us. And remember, it's still a new country. We're only 250 years old, basically. And if we don't sit there and start realizing that it was set up for our protection, like some say, oh, you want to get your birth certificate, you want to do this. Without your birth certificate registration, you cannot prove your bloodline. You cannot prove that you were born on this soil, lawful or legal. And so when you go into the court structures, you have to know if you're lawful or legal, all right? If you want to claim to be a citizen is owned by the government. It's not freedom.
If I may.
And that's the point, that you have to comprehend how they portray and twist this stuff, what they have done in the mind control that we've got in education since World War II. When they put in the education system in 1968, remember, the education system was put in 1968. Prior to that, most schools grew their own food. Most schools actually taught the Constitution. After 1980, most people who graduate college today is still on a 9th grade education. They're not a college education. We've been dumbed down so hard, and that is the point to realize and accept that we've been dumbed down for the corporation standing. And it's like everybody says, oh, you need an attorney. Well, most of us grew up, if anybody's over 50 and that stuff, we grew up, and if you ever heard the term, a fool hires an attorney, a man defends himself.
I heard an AI.
Yeah.
Or woman, okay, thank you.
Yeah, it was me.
But, go ahead.
Yeah, what makes me lawful is my family landed on Plymouth Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And they also went through the Plymouth Rock conflict as the oppressed.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes me lawful. But the point is Plymouth Rock was 1600. That's what makes me lawful.
1492 or 16 what?
1600.
Right. And then they say they brought their Bible, but the only Bible that was in existence back then was not really a Bible. It was what they call writings. And that is the confusion we go through, because if you ever read the Geneva Bible of 1599, it says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and if you don't make your amends, then the injured party or family has the right to dictate the punishment. If you make amends, you are forgiven. King James Bible came in and says, oh, you have to pay the church, you have to make amends to the church and their God. You're not making amends to the injured party. That's like the courts are running today. You pay a court on damages and fees, and the injured party gets nothing. When you get your bike stolen, your motorcycle stolen, and if they claim it, you're lucky if you get it back, because most of the time they'll put it in their own coffers and sell it. Go ahead.
Auction it off. We're 3 minutes plus, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can close.
Huh?
Go ahead. I was just going to say we can close.
So anyhow, I would like to thank, like Dave says, remember, and it disturbs me, and use this point and write it in what Dave's point of view is. All right? If you have an attorney and you're incompetent, and put it in your complaint, your criminal complaint. The attorney should pay the penalties of going to jail and pay your fine. If he's representing an indigent or an intelligent or stupid man or woman, write it. That's going to freak the court out.
Yeah,
So
challenge them.
You have to do this stuff because if you don't stand up on these rights, your rights, lawful or legal, and it's like we have the structure for legal too up there, for citizenship and all this. Citizens and legal is a different structure than lawful. But in legal, so long as you're paying your taxes, so long as you're paying your administration fees and all that structure, the Constitution is to protect you paying the privilege until you become lawful, your bloodline. Okay, so this is the point that we've got to get it. Because, I'm arguing with senators and congressmen about bloodline right now, and a lot of them get it. I've talked to many senators, and, oh, yeah, we know the difference there, lawful and legal. But, see, unless you stand up to these men and women, they put you in a category under democracy. We're all supposed to be under the same, what they call shield. And remember what a shield is. So, anyhow, with that, I would like to say a blessing, to all. May the Great Spirit and Mother Earth watch over you. And remember, without water and food, collecting rainwater and growing food on your property, you don't know what you're doing or you don't know what you're eating. And the other point is you could type in, because 60% of your food in the market is not food, it's plastic, liquid, whatever. And even your breakfast cereal that you feed from your kids, check the iron out, grind it up, see if you can take a magnet and if you get real iron out of it compared to iron vitamins. This is how we're going to be protecting one another and the bloodline. Without that, you cannot educate your children. Anyhow, I would like to say travel safely. May the Great Spirit bless you. Some would say, okay, may God bless you.
God bless you.
But go ahead.
I said God bless you.
So, and without us starting to do this and educate one another on the structures, we cannot sit there and educate our children if we don't know the truth to educate them. So with that, I would like to say travel safe, bless you, and remember to protect yourself and your bloodline first. Because without the Great Spirit and without Mother Earth, there are no children.
Amen.
So good night.